the villain of their story, or how I ruined someone's entire future without even meaning to. My coworker would always talk about how, Jessica and I were going to go here, or Jessica and I went there, or Jess and I got up to this, that, or the other. One day I ran into him and his wife in the wild. He introduced her only as my wife. I of course said, "Oh, Jessica, it's nice to meet you. I've heard so much about you." Gentle listener, his wife's name was not Jessica. I feel nothing about this, by the way. He shouldn't have been cheating on his wife. But you know what? If you're going to do that, you shouldn't spend years telling me about Jessica and then introduce your wife only as my wife. Big moving day on a busy road a while ago. Lots of moving parts, permits, store downstairs, reserved parking, just an incredibly stressful amount of management. When the day comes, me and my roomies were incredibly stressed, because if one thing goes wrong, the whole house of cards collapses. It seemed, however, to be smooth sailing. The only thing that was annoying was that cars kept parking on our reserved space before we got our moving vans there. Most of them left numbers that we could call, so we did, and they'd usually leave. Right before my dad was supposed to show up, 4 cars park in the reserved spot. They'd left no phone number for us. Their owners weren't even in sight. There was no way for me to get any of these cars out of there. To be clear, this meant that there was nowhere for my dad to park the moving van in this incredibly busy road. If he couldn't, we couldn't move stuff, which was completely blocking the already very tight hallway and first part of the stairwell. Moving my stuff back up 4 floors was out of the question. I had like 40 minutes to solve this, so I just called the cops. They showed up within 15 minutes, start writing down fines, and told me they'll get a tow truck. Half an hour later, the tow truck shows up along with a couple of the car's owners. Big arguments between the cops and the owners. All of a sudden, reinforcements show up, like 6 other cops. Apparently, they'd seen substances laying in one of the cars that was illegally parked there, and the guy seemed to be working in the shisha bar across the street. So, they detain the guy with illegal substances and wait around for an hour to get a warrant to raid the frickin' shisha place. Meanwhile, one cop is holding back traffic, including trams in 2 directions, so that my dad can parallel park the van. Other civilians are still arguing. It's frickin' chaos, and I'm just standing there so frickin' stressed out about what's going on. Suddenly, one of the cops asks me if the sandwich place downstairs in the building always has their outdoor seating out like they do when they were there. Apparently, that's also illegal, so they start getting into that. 4 people get pretty big fines and towing costs. The sandwich place has no more outdoor seating, and the shisha place is closed, and I'm sure the smack dealer was arrested, just because they parked in my spot. Hey, have you ever been at a job at like a boring meeting or something, and then someone says by the way, that then goes on to derail your entire working day with extra urgent tasks and stresses you the heck out? That's kind of the scaled-down equivalent to the level of casual destruction you inflicted on your street. And it's absolutely amazing. I bet you're glad you don't live there now. I was working for a federal program, and I had a boss who hired her sister without disclosing to higher-ups that it was her sister, which, by the way, is a disclosure required by our program. The boss then paid the sister twice the usual rate for the job, and the sister was logging a lot of extra work hours that she hadn't actually been working. I only found out because my boss insisted I needed to do the timesheet inputs for her because she, the boss, couldn't be bothered. She told me to take any questions to my boss's boss and just left for the day. I noticed the discrepancy immediately and went to the boss's boss to let them know there was an issue with time tracking versus scheduling on the sister's timesheet, and I wanted to know what I should do. The whole sister thing was news to boss's boss, and then the discrepancy triggered an investigation that uncovered a whole bunch of other misuse of government funding. The boss lost her job, the FBI got involved, and the boss eventually ended up with some massive fines and jail time. Knowing what I know now, I would accidentally report her again. I've yet to find a story about someone ruining someone else's life on here. So far it's all, somebody was frantically screwing up their own life, and I accidentally shone a light on their behavior. I accidentally stumbled upon a $2.5 million Ponzi scheme when I was in finance. The person involved wound up self-deleting once the feds got involved. What made it even worse is that after I left the company, my old boss would reach out once in a while and he'd always bring it up. Hey, you remember the whole Ponzi scheme thing? Yeah, I do think about that person now and again. I do photography and videography at weddings. This particular wedding, half the guests spoke a language I'm not fluent in, and it was before AI translations existed. The mother of the bride said something derogatory about the groom's mum in her native language, and I included it in their video because she was smiling when she said it. Turns out the groom's mum spoke multiple languages. I wouldn't say you ruined anyone's life here. You were doing your job. The mother of the bride did that to herself. People know there's cameras and video being taken at weddings. Frankly, you might have done the mother of the groom a favor. Now she knows what the in-laws really think of her, and she can act accordingly. My good friend was scheduled to have surgery when it was discovered that she had an aneurysm. I was with her at the hospital with her family, and right before she was taken away, she handed me her phone and said she wanted me to keep it until she was in recovery. She ended up dying on the operating table. She was a heavy smoker for more than 20 years, and that doctor couldn't find any good tissue to graft to save her. I turned her phone back on and handed it to her husband. It was maybe 24 hours after her death when we discovered that she had been having an affair for years. She had been embezzling money from the business to provide for her boyfriend and signed over a car to him that he was supposedly still paying for. Let me tell you, that broke all of us. I still have unresolved feelings towards her for putting me in that position. I think she knew I'd figure it out and expected me to cover for her. I love and I miss you, Amy, but you're a piece of crap for doing that to your family. I caught my brother-in-law committing unspeakable crimes against his family. He ended himself afterwards to avoid going to jail. I have no regrets. He'd been carrying on like that for 4 years before I caught him. His kids are grown now. Their lives are 100 times better with him gone. I'm grateful I caught him because we wouldn't have known otherwise because he threatened them all into silence. I was only 21 years old at the time of catching him. It was a very traumatic thing to witness, let alone for them to experience it, but now they're all safe and that's all that matters to me. This isn't my story, but an old coworker's, and it's timely because it's September 11th at the time of writing. Said ex-coworker was a manager at a different company, and at the time he managed a team member who just wasn't cutting it. He gave her lots of chances and opportunities, but was failing miserably at the job. He made the decision to fire her. She was terribly upset. She loved the job and the company and begged him to stay. He had to say no. Fast forward a few weeks later, she gets a new job opportunity, across the country, needs to fly out for the interview. She was on one of the planes that hit the towers on her way to that interview. He obviously had no control over any of this, but felt deep regret for a long time. What if he'd waited just a few more weeks to fire her, delayed her search for a new job, and then she wouldn't have been on that plane? The story always sticks with me. Many years ago, I was going to the track for the harness races, and I asked this one guy, Alan, if he wanted to tag along. He was 17, I think. He had never even seen a horse before. Each race, I'd tell him what I thought, and he'd bet either $2 or just skip the race. $2 was important to him. Then, in a late race, there was a horse named Minya Mitzvah. He got all excited. Oh, a Jewish horse, I've got to bet on him. The horse was awful, and I told him so. The odds were 30-1 against him. This was early winter, and there was a heavy fog obscuring the far side of the track. Off they go and disappear into the fog. Even the announcer is saying, well, your guess is as good as mine, ladies and gentlemen. They're in the fog for a long time, and finally the first horse emerges, alone. We're waiting for the rest of the pack to emerge, which eventually emerges from the field, but the lead horse is way out in front. Who knows what happened in that fog? We can now see the colors, and sure enough, it's Minya Mitzvah. It cruises home and Alan reveals that he bet $10 on it. So now this kid suddenly has more money than he's ever seen in his life. His brain is doing cartwheels. And he was hooked. From that day on, he became a degenerate gambler, always chasing that high. Years later, he told me, I can't stop. Even if you gave me $1 million, I'd be broke in a year. All because of a Jewish horse and me casually asking him to tag along. Damn, man. If it wasn't for that horse, he would have gone to college. I'm so sorry, but as a Jewish person, that guy throwing it all away over a Jewish horse named Minya Mitzvah is the funniest thing I've seen all year. That name doesn't even make any sense. Did he buy into conspiracy theories and think Jewish equals money? I mean, look, of course addiction, especially gambling addiction, is beyond tragic, but come on, man. And I think that's our first real story of someone innocently setting off a butterfly effect of destruction on someone else's life. A lot of these, as a commenter mentioned previously, are just people who only sped up consequences of people who were by no means innocent or were ruining their own lives. But who can say if the gambling addiction would have ever taken off without this first big win? Most gamblers do have the story of the big high that led to their downfall. And there's probably a lot of them who never have theirs activated in the first place. My coworker went on a road trip to Seattle. I jokingly asked him to bring back some smack. I was not a user and didn't actually want any, to be clear. It was a joke. Do you hear me, Internet? It was a joke. Well, on the day that he was supposed to be back, he calls me and says he's running late and might not be there on time. So I don't get concerned when he's not in at his scheduled time. An hour later, and I call him again. No answer. He doesn't come in that night. Calls me the next day. He was speeding excessively to get to work yesterday. Still in another state and got pulled over. He had some green herb in his car, just a personal amount, but still not great. The problem was he had a very small amount of smack, of the black tar variety as well. He'd been bringing it back to me as a joke. Let me tell you, that joke ruined his life. He had to move to that state in the hopes of avoiding a charge for transporting substances over state lines. Since he had two separate kinds of illegal goods, they pinned a dealing charge on him. It didn't end up in jail time, but long probation, and he had to live in a crappy place for years. I apologized to him, and I felt terrible. He never once blamed me or had any animosity. He knew it was his choice and that he'd messed up. I still felt bad about it. Honestly, the fact that he knew where to buy tells me that he might well have had it anyway without you having made that remark. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? We kept having boxes of parts lost when they were shipped to customers and manufacturers. About 20 grand worth by one point. I was in charge of operations, so I had to figure it out and keep it quiet since we didn't know if it was one of our employees or not. I installed a GPS tracker in a box and had it ship like 5 times back and forth between 2 of our locations until I finally got it figured out. It was an orchestration between one of our employees and a FedEx driver. Long story short, our HR fired our employee and alerted FedEx, who did the same. Our company didn't press any civil charges, and the DA declined to prosecute because the evidence was very thin. I thought nothing of it for about 2 years, but then a fellow employee linked me to a news article that the former FedEx employee had recently died from substance overuse while homeless. I don't know if my solving our theft problem directly caused it, but I'm sure it contributed to their downward spiral. Hi, I just wanted to say that someone stealing from their workplace is pretty classic substance user behavior. It's very likely that this person had a substance issue that drove them to the behavior, and not the other way around. I hope you don't let that hang on yourself. I was a volunteer firefighter a while back. My pager went off for a medical assist. We often had to help ambulance with patient lifts and stuff. So I opted to give my spot on the truck to the rookie we had in training. Figured a lift assist so he could help with the guys and get that mental boost of being on the team. No big deal. Let me tell ya, I shouldn't have. Patient was an older guy who'd been smoking in his wheelchair, wearing synthetics with oxygen through nose. Caught fire. It was a lift assist to get the patient onto the helicopter. He didn't survive the flight. The rookie had to see that as his first call. He left the brigade shortly after. Some stuff you really can never unsee, and he was just a high schooler trying to do something good for the community. I hope he's okay these days. I've seen a lot that'll never leave me either, but I've come to accept that is how life and death can be, and I was prepared the moment the helmet came on for whatever came at me. For that kid, it was probably his first experience of that, and he was really unprepared for it. There are really some things you can't unsee and experiences you can't unlive. I once spent a night shift searching for a guy's fingers after he cut them off with a handheld bandsaw while working outside. It was fall and the temperatures dropped below 0 at night, so if we found them within a reasonable period of time, they might have been salvageable. I wish that was my most messed up shift in oil country, but sadly, it wasn't. Mine was only temporary, luckily. I was looking after my friend's apartment while they were on vacation. There was building work outside and somebody hit the downpipe of the toilet, which broke the ceramic toilet bowl, flooding the bathroom. I cleaned it all up and then complained to the building management and asked for the toilet to be replaced before they got back, which set off a series of events that led to them being evicted. Turns out they were illegally subletting without knowing it. I felt like absolute crap at the time, but they ended up moving back to Australia because of it, and living a good life there, so I'm okay with that now. When I was in high school, me and a friend of mine were trying to go to a Major League Baseball game. It was right before smartphones, and his car didn't have GPS, so we got lost going there. Lost touch with him a couple of years before seeing him at a house party, and I brought it up laughing about how he got lost. Turns out he didn't tell his parents where we were going. His mum saw the toll bills from where we got lost and thought that it was his dad using the car to cheat on her, and that his dad slept on the couch for a year before my friend realized our excursion was a contributing factor to his parents fighting. When he told me the story, it seemed like they'd reconciled, and I'm sure the toll bill wasn't the only thing going on, but it was pretty wild finding out that two dumb kids on a summer break trying to go to a baseball game played a part in a marriage potentially breaking down. I work in human resources, and way back when I was new and naive, I had a home address change request for an employee come across my desk. I couldn't read the handwriting and wanted to be sure that I put in the correct new address, so I called their house and their wife answered. I asked her about it, and much to my surprise, she said, "What the hell are you talking about?" The employee came up to me a few days later and said, "I didn't tell her I was moving out yet." Something similar happened to me. This one guest hadn't paid for his hotel room. The reminder letter we sent was ignored. In desperation, I Googled his name and city in the phone book. I found something and called. Yes, I'd gotten the right number because his wife picked up. She was very interested, and only at the end, when I could hear her getting angry at her husband and her telling me he'll have hell to pay, I realized that he must have had an affair or something and used the hotel for it. So when you have an affair, pay your hotel bill, folks. Yeah, that feels like a no-brainer, although at this stage in my life I'm no expert in extramarital affairs. But also, how did you let someone stay there without proper contact details or a phone number? In any case, well done on setting his wife free, I hope. I unknowingly introduced a really good friend to the most toxic person I've ever come across in my life. My college buddy, Chris, that's a fake name by the way, well, we both had a Thursday afternoon off and decided to hit up a happy hour. It was early, and there were only about a dozen people in the bar, including us and a group of 3 girls. One of the girls was 100% Chris's type. Tall, slim, dark hair, outgoing, but he was a shy guy and didn't have the courage to strike up a conversation. 30 minutes and some liquid courage later, I took it upon myself to start chatting with the girls and specifically introduced Chris to the tall, dark-haired girl Veronica, also a fake name for the purposes of this story. She and her friends were all single, our age, in a nursing program at a crosstown school, and seemed like nice girls. Chris, myself, and the girls ended up shutting down the bar that night, and by 10 p.m., Chris and Veronica were fully sucking face and acting like the rest of us didn't exist. I was happy for Chris, but I got a little nervous when they ended up leaving together, and her friends started joking about not knowing what he was in for. Whatever, he's an adult, and far be it from me to rain on his parade. After that night, Chris effectively disappeared off the map. The only times I'd see him were in class or at that same bar with Veronica. The guy just kinda seemed off, but refused to talk about it and insisted that he was happy. Veronica, on the other hand, refused to let him out of her sight. She'd make him wait outside the bathroom for her. Surprise, surprise, turns out Veronica was a complete sociopath and narcissist and straight-up con artist who bled Chris dry both financially and emotionally. Highlights include, but are not limited to, fake pregnancies, forcing him to cut off friends, demanding that he drop classes to fit her schedule, and manipulating him into paying her rent and bills and just for her lifestyle. Now, Chris came from a nice upper-middle-class family who he was super close with, and apparently they rightfully had some suspicions about this girl. I just figured he was head over heels for Veronica and ignoring all of us, but I knew something was wrong when his mum called me and asked if I'd spoken to Chris lately. Turns out he'd drained his bank account and started racking up significant debt on the credit card he shared with his parents, buying crazily expensive jewelry and makeup and clothes for Veronica. That was enough for his parents to drive the 4 hours from their hometown to stage a mini intervention. In the end, Chris had to drop out of school, move back home, and his parents ended up getting a restraining order against Veronica. His parents forced him to get a job to pay for the $3,000 he'd accrued, and ended up forfeiting his partial football scholarship. I lost touch with him once he moved back home, but I sometimes wonder how his life would have turned out if we didn't go to that happy hour at Kelly's on that Thursday. Not directly, but a friend came to me once to casually ask me about another friend and how they were handling their new job. The friend with the new job had been ecstatic because it was a huge opportunity for their career in an oversaturated field. It was essentially their big break. I told the first friend that they were loving it and handling it just fine, and that friend asked if they were stressed or anything. So I offhandedly said something about them having friction with one of their coworkers, but they were doing fine. What I didn't know is that the friend asking me these questions was friends with the coworker and used what I told that friend to help get my friend fired for, quote, creating a toxic work environment. Not only was it very high school drama, but it ruined the trajectory of my friend's career completely, and they're still struggling today to find meaningful employment despite this happening 4 years ago. Not me, but my husband. He's the reason why my parents are divorced. When my husband and I were engaged, I drove to work, and when I got there, instead of my car turning off like normal, it sounded like it just died, let out its last breath and was gone. I called my fiancé and he drove over, had my car towed to a shop and got it looked at. He did all of this while I was at work. I later told my mum about this and she was floored. Wait, you mean he just took care of it? He wasn't upset? He wasn't irritated to have to take care of it? If that happened to me, your dad would take care of it, but he'd be mad and find a way to blame me. My mum left my dad a week later. To be fair, this was their second divorce, but my mum saw everything so clearly that day. When did a random nobody absolutely blow your frickin' mind? I went to my local racquetball court looking for a pickup game when I was in my early 20s. This was in San Diego back in 91 or 92. I was reasonably athletic and I was just starting to consider myself competent at racquetball. Anyway, the only other player there was a 70-year-old retired naval officer. He offers a match, so lacking more athletic opposition, I accepted. Never before and never since have I been beaten so badly at anything. He completely and effortlessly destroyed me. We played 3 matches and I scored only 1 point. I was left exhausted and utterly broken. He barely broke a sweat. I don't think I've picked up a racket since then, so utter was my defeat. In short, senior citizen crushes cocky 21-year-old 63-1 playing racquetball. Mullet man. I met this guy, a construction worker. He was gruff, older, and rocked a long mullet. The party in the back was thick and went all the way down his back. I thought he was just a crusty, kinda white trash dude, and started calling him Mullet Man in my head and to my coworkers. We worked for a competing firm and saw him at industry events. Fast forward a few months, and I hear him telling someone how his niece has a terminal illness, and he's growing out his hair for her to have a new wig made. He'd heard that untreated hair works best, so he figured his would be ideal. I've never felt like such a jerk. You go, Mullet Man, you beautiful human. I worked at an electronics retailer 2 years ago. One day, a middle-aged farmer, and I mean farmer, complete with overalls, boots, and a straight-billed cap, came into the store looking for a cell phone. I immediately sold him the simplest, easiest phone we carried, going into great detail on every feature, including the camera, sending text messages, and every imaginable part of the phone's hardware and software. The next day, the same guy comes in, and I immediately think he's having phone trouble and resign myself to an hour of explanation. He asks for an external hard drive because he wants to move his custom kernel of Linux to his new computer. I can't remember the exact details, I was totally floored by his request. He then spots my textbook on international political economy. My boss was very forgiving of me studying in slow times, and the farmer asks me 15 minutes of in-depth questions on one of the main contemporary theorists in the field, Karl Polanyi, beyond even what myself and my classmates had asked. The class was graduate level. Needless to say, I was berating myself for ever stereotyping this seemingly backwards farmer from the 60s. You've got a lot of time to sit and think about stuff when you're watching corn grow. Nice overreaching lesson on the majority of these stories. Do not judge a book by its cover. A truly ancient saying that you think most of us would have had the sense to accept by now. Apparently not. Met a guy while going through college. He was in my major and most of my classes. He was blazed most of the time and had no fricking brains about him. He failed almost every class due to not trying or slacking off and was always in an insane panic the last 2 weeks of classes to not fail. He ended up repeating classes a lot. At some point, I decided to switch colleges. I graduate this December. I got a LinkedIn request from him yesterday. He has finished his master's in engineer technology now and has buttloads of recommendations on his profile from employers that he did internships under, all giving him glowing reviews about his work ethic. I left this guy in the dust 3 years ago. Sometime between then and now, he cleaned up his act and worked so hard that not only did he close the year gap in courses between me and him due to all his failings, but he also accelerated ahead 2 additional years and finished a master's. How the frick did he do that, Fred? I watched you come to class blazed for a year, and then you cram 4 years of work into 2? Dance off with a 6'2", 150-pound white man. Never again.
Tall, white, skinny dudes are black men in disguise.
We've got the moves like Gumby. I have a friend who has dyslexia and is incredibly shy even around his close friends. We did an electronics project in high school where we had to design an electronic game or a metronome or some other crap. He chose to make a game and made this incredible device that played a happy little tune when you won and a sad tune when you lost. It sat in a well-molded and polished box and had a segment display on the front. I was in awe sitting there with my crappy little metronome that didn't even work. A group of family friends and I went paintballing for the first time, which ended up having a bunch of the kids against the parents. Being young and cocky, we thought it would be a stomp and marched confidently into the woods. What we forgot was that all of our parents were immigrants from Taiwan. Taiwan has mandatory military service. I was reminded of that fact rather harshly when I tried to ambush my dad. The paintball in my face pinned this fact to my memory forever.
I worked with this kid who was kinda pudgy. He wanted to be a Navy SEAL. Everyone laughed. He did it. He became a Navy SEAL.
Similar story. When I was in AIT, like Army Vocational School for enlisted people, the airborne recruiters came around and gave this presentation about airborne school, and at the end they asked for volunteers to sign up and attend the school after they completed AIT. Now, the only real benefits of going to airborne school are the few extra bucks every pay period just for having the training, and the prestige of having that red beret. Maybe a dozen people from our company ended up signing up for the school. It was mostly who you'd expect. The hoo-ah guys who thought they were hot crap and wanted to prove it to everyone. Except for one guy, Curtis. Curtis is an odd fellow. He was in his early 20s, short, pudgy, and goofy. Whenever he walked past someone, other enlisted people of course, he'd cross his eyes and pull a silly face. He joked around a lot, was a very social and cool guy, but he wasn't exactly, tough. Not someone who seems like airborne material. So naturally, all of the other guys who signed up at airborne school started talking crap about him. How he was going to wash out in the first weeks, among other things. AIT came to an end and we all went on to our first duty stations. I'd added a lot of people from my AIT company on my Facebook account, and one day I was looking through the newsfeed and I saw a picture of Curtis in a red beret. Turns out he was the only person from our company to graduate from airborne school. All those crap talkers and tough guys are washed out. The chubby little goof now rocks the raspberry beret. What a frickin' trooper. Every time I play StarCraft. How the frick does he have 10 carriers? This is bullcrap, it's been 35 seconds! I'm working as a production assistant on a reality TV show. We had to shoot at a record store in a very impoverished, crime-laden area of the Bronx, and we had a celebrity or two with us. So we hire some security people to keep the local riffraff at bay. In the past, the security guys had been overzealous, rude, giant bouncer butthole-like dudes, so we're filming and a celebrity walks in. A crowd's already gathered, and they're getting loud and being obnoxious. This one super thuggish 20-something-year-old starts pushing his way through the crowd and gets to the door but gets stopped by one of the bouncers. Now, this bouncer guy is a 250 or so pound black dude who's a fricking monster, not to mention he has a piece on him. I'm freaking out because Thug Life is getting pushy and yelling at the security guy, yelling at me and being a butthead. Bouncer says, "Baby, you know I want to let you in here. I love you, man, but I can't. It's my job and you know how it is. I got kids, and with that style of yours, I'm sure you got yourself a hot mama back home too." Thuggish kid goes, "Aight, man," and slaps and hugs the security guy, then walks out. Situation entirely diffused. Security guy looks at me with this huge grin and says, "You gotta kill him with kindness, baby." I hear this is a great tactic for confrontation in general for people who come in just determined to hate on everything. Say you're sorry you didn't like it, did my best to make it good, tell them something you like about their appearance, if applicable, and apparently the majority of the time they'll apologize, say they were having a bad day and leave. Cute when it works out, no promises that it will though. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I found out one of my dumber friends had the unique ability of knowing how long anything would take. Anything. She was not the brightest button, failed out of college, and made terrible financial decisions, but damn if she didn't know how long it would take to go to Walmart, get gas, and come home. 34 minutes. If you gave her a highway marker, she'd tell you down to the minute how far away you were from your house. It was incredible. I've never seen anything like it, and she was never wrong. The little woman who was my first partner in Taekwondo. I was a much taller white belt and she was a green belt. That was the first day I watched the gymnasium ceiling pass overhead in a slow, dreamy way, followed by the sound of my landing. I was roughly about 8 or 9, so me, my mom, 2 brothers and a friend all went to the cinema. We ended up getting out of the cinema at like 10. As we were walking back to the car, I kind of dropped back a little bit as I was in my own world. All I heard from behind me was a teen's voice getting my attention. Unaware of any real dangers in life, at such a tender age, and my mum a few meters up ahead from me, I turned around. Soon as I turned, one of the kids knees me in the stomach and the other one punched me in the face. The worst bit was I couldn't even shout as I was winded. A few seconds pass, and I shouted. My mum turned and saw me on the floor and started sprinting for these kids. She ran straight past me, and I can imagine she was probably thinking, "Screw him, they're going to be eating through a straw." So right in front of me, my mum grabbed one of them and started punching the 16-year-old kid in the face, throwing him around like a rag doll. The other one was shouting for her to stop, and he ran up to my mum and she did literally the same to him. But I could see blood all over this other one's jacket. She had ripped part of his ear. Security came over not so long after, and then the cops. These kids were arrested and nothing came of my mum kicking 7 shades of crap out of them. Turns out they'd been going around the metro center, where the cinema was, shoplifting, pickpocketing, and being all-round urethras. Safe to say everyone in school knew the next day. I imagine it was a good bully deterrent as well. When I was going through college, I was put into a group for a group project with a guy that I'd been paired with before. He had done nothing. It was awful. We ended up picking up all of his slack last time, and I wasn't looking forward to doing that again. Well, long story short, apparently he'd had a little come-to-Jesus moment with his advisor and realized he needed to put effort into graduating. That guy frickin' carried us. 11 out of 10 stars. It was amazing. Group leader asked him to do something and he knocked it out of the frickin' park. We got a 100% on the project. Top grade in our class. My grandpa has Parkinson's, and in the last few years he's been getting really frail to the point where you can't feel anything between the skin and the bone. Anyway, taking care of him was becoming a lot for my step-grandmother, so we tried finding a good nursing home for him. At the home where he went, people treated him so badly that he had a flashback to being a prisoner of war in the Korean War. My grandma got a call that they found him 3 miles away, perfectly fine, but we all thought the guy couldn't even get out of bed on his own. My grandfather's getting close to dying now, and he certainly did a lot during his life. It was good to hear that he still had some of that in him, when he just seemed like a shell before. My father-in-law. My mother-in-law raised my husband and his brother, and my father-in-law was always kind of this quiet presence. She always said he was disinterested and didn't care about the boys. She said a lot of really awful things about him. Their divorce was messy, but I took what she said at face value. Fast forward to now. When I got laid off, my father-in-law, in his quiet way, invited us to stay at his house until I finished school, with our 2 crazy toddlers and our old cat, who doesn't always make it to the litter box. I was hesitant at first, but we didn't really have options. Turns out he's this salt-of-the-earth guy. He works and reads and builds stuff for our babies to play with, like a 6-inch tall working windmill, and he's the best grandpa any kid could ever want. Turns out he always loved the boys deeply, but struggled with depression since my mother-in-law took them and left. He's brought everyone birthday presents, school clothes, and things since they were little, even though they had no idea. I also found out that he's been paying off all of mother-in-law's bills even after the boys grew up and moved out. When I asked him why, he said, "She's the mother of my children. I don't really want to see her struggle." One of the best people I know. I hope one day we can repay him for all of his kindness. I was in high school, and behind my friend's house there was some farmland. One day, for whatever reason, 4 of us decided to go out there and build a fort. It ended up turning out awesome, and we decided to spend the night in it. We filled up an empty water bottle with his parents' vodka and built a fire out there. The owner of the property must have seen the fire and didn't appreciate us trespassing, so he called the cops. Around midnight, 5 or 6 cops surrounded us. We were all underage and we tried to convince the cops we weren't drinking. It worked because we hadn't really started drinking much of the vodka yet, and the cops didn't think to open our water bottle. So the cops tell us as long as we put out the fire and take down the fort, we wouldn't get into any trouble. My idiot friend says, "Okay, officer, we'll just go ahead and put this fire out and be on our way," and dumps the bottle into the fire. Whoosh! Instantly in handcuffs. I underestimated my friend that day. He was that stupid. Maybe I overestimated him. Oh well, still a funny story. And here I was waiting for the story of how one of those rural country cops turned out to be a super sleuth who completely blew your mind by identifying the viscosity and slight color difference of vodka in the bottle. But nope, just a truly amazing level of dumb. Well done, friend. I did outreach with working girls from the street for a few years. One went missing under suspicious circumstances, and there was evidence that she had been murdered, but no body. The police had the guy but needed to build a strong case. He was known to some of the women, so the cops wanted to talk with as many as possible. Most did, but there was one who was rumored to have strong evidence of the man's intent. She was so strung out all the time, and literally months went by of her blowing off appointments with the cops to tell what she knew. She would hide from them as she was scared. They finally picked her up on the street and she talked to them, as by then they knew that making appointments with her was a dead end. It turns out she did have some great info, and they wanted her to appear in court. We helped her as much as possible, got her a decent outfit and toiletries, and kept reminding her of the date and location of the trial. She didn't show up when she was due, much to everyone's disappointment. Next day of the trial, she walked in, clean, in a nice outfit, and sober. Testified very well. In fact, impressively. She said later that she had gone on a huge bender the day before due to being nervous and knew she wouldn't come across well. He is now serving a life sentence. Really didn't think she had it in her, but she happily proved us all wrong. I underestimated my cousin. She always seemed to be the queen bee of middle school, and I resented her for it. But one day I heard that she completely ditched the in-crowd because they were making fun of some kid. I realized I'd been completely wrong about her character and that I'm extremely proud of her for this. I was arguing with a customer at work. I, like a pretentious jerk, tried to reinforce a point I was making by quoting the only line I knew from Shakespeare's Merchant of Venice. She, in a fit of anger, proceeded to give me the next 20 lines of that character's soliloquy all from memory. I got owned. Big time. My kid. So he was born with some limb differences. Missing bones, clubbed hands, 3 fingers instead of 4 because 1 finger had to be made into thumbs. Was looking forward to having a boy who was into sports, but I just figured that wasn't going to happen. Didn't think he could hold a baseball bat or throw a ball straight, among other things. Figured soccer or running, if anything, would be his thing. When he was 2, he was really into hockey. I figured, he's 2, it'll pass. Nope, the little guy learned how to skate in diapers, but had a hard time holding the stick. We wrote to a whole bunch of hockey glove manufacturers, and Reebok had just brought CCM, or the other way round, and they made him custom gloves. They didn't work, but it was really freaking cool they did that. The kiddo got the first pair of RBK gloves in the world. Anyway, so he turns 4 and wants to play t-ball and soccer, and gets older and tries lacrosse, all the while playing hockey. I figure he'll give up because he won't be very good at those things, but he is. He's actually decent at soccer, baseball, lacrosse, basketball and golf, you name it. Not a star, clearly, but good enough to contribute to the team. So he turns 8 and his older buddy from the neighborhood is a hockey phenom. Gets invited to be on all these AAA summer teams, so my kid wants to do that. Well, he can contribute to the team, but he's nothing like this kid. I let him try out for a new team in the area, but they don't get enough kids for his birth year. He tries again, next year, same deal. They take a couple of kids from his birth year and put them in with the older group, but not him. So the 3rd year, he makes the team and improves immensely. But this team isn't that great, being a new team and all. So he decides he's going to play in the NHL, and to do that he has to play Division 1 hockey, and to do that he wants to get a scholarship to a prep school near here, and to do that he needs to make a higher level AAA summer team. The kid has it all planned out. So I tell him, look, crazy talent like Crosby or Gretzky doesn't come along all that often, so teams still have to fill their rosters, but there's a lot of competition, and if you want to make it to that level, you have to put in the work to get there. This team he wants to make is ridiculous money. Even in hockey terms. And I tell him if he wants to play summer hockey for fun, that's no problem, but if he wants to play on the expensive one, I'm going to need to see him working hard. No asking to skip practice. I'm willing to pay if he's willing to put in the work. I said nothing else. He's 11 at this time. Wouldn't you know it, the little crapbag puts in the work and makes the team. So now he's 11, and he's got scouts coming to games and invitations to play in tournaments, and the special camps are coming in. He's been schmoozing the nearest juniors coach, and one night he raced a bunch of the players on the team, who were all ages 17 to 20, and kicked 2 of their butts. One of them was 6'5" to my kid's 5'4". The coach tracked me down and told him he was saving a spot for my kid on his team. He's gotten himself TV interviews, articles in the newspaper, and spots on teams by being charming, good-looking, polite, and by being a hockey player who works hard and is coachable and puts the team's needs before his own, and sometimes over players, who are a tad better skill-wise than he is. So yeah, I totally underestimated my own kid. What an awesome story of grit and just a great attitude. And all that success and pre-planning at the age of 12? The guy's more onto his life pre-puberty than some of us are at 30. Amazing kid, he deserves all the best. Underestimated, but in a good way. There was a Super Smash Bros. Brawl tournament in 2009 at the dorms, open to all residents. It was a team tournament, so you got matched up with one person for the whole night. I got a soft-spoken guy whose first words I heard were, I thought this one had Mega Man in it. So I'm cursing several Greco-Roman gods at getting probably the biggest noob in the room. Turns out he was the best in the room and was just trolling me. Took on everyone and won with a little help from me, here and there. We later played against each other in 1v1 tournaments and he beat me by a smidge, but he helped me get a $25 Best Buy gift card. I invited my girlfriend along to Paintball for my 21st birthday. Her grandparents owned a farm, so I knew she wasn't a princess, but she certainly isn't low maintenance these days. The game was Capture the Flag. The field was set up in a valley with a team on either side and a single meter-wide footbridge connecting the two sides. The flag was sitting in the middle of the bridge, the only cover being two waist-high walls on either side. We pushed up to the flag and were pinned by a vicious volley of vivid viscera. Naturally, I'm scared crapless and I hunker down. Clearly all that time playing first-person shooters hasn't trained me to be a super soldier at all. Just as I'd mustered enough courage to keep my head above the cover, I see my girlfriend blaze past with reckless abandon, shooting wildly. She nabs the flag, runs back past me and back towards base. She never got hit once. I have never been more stunned or impressed than that moment. In short, my girlfriend wears the pants and I go number 2 in mine. What were serial killers like in person before they got caught? A guy I work with used to carpool to school with Aaron Hernandez. A mutual friend used to go to high school with him and said he was a pretty normal kid for a while. He said he really changed when he went down to Florida for a summer for probably some football-related stuff. When he came back, he looked like a different person, all tatted up, bigger and taller. Spent a summer in Ames, Iowa with some family. Jeffrey Dahmer was a neighbor of a family friend. My cousin and I built a haunted house out of a playhouse in the backyard. Mostly we blindfolded the neighborhood kids and led them through. We had a bowl of grapes with some oil on them and shoved the kids' hands into it and told them it was eyeballs. We formed cold, congealed spaghetti into what we told them were brains. I personally led Jeffrey through, and every time someone says his name, I wonder if I was the cause of his problems. He was a loner in one of the biggest schools in the state. He wasn't weird or creepy or smelly or anything, but the popular kids would pick on him. He was friends with my girlfriend. We were going to hang out one weekend, but he bludgeoned his mother to death and ran away with his girlfriend instead. I'm probably relatively unique in that I know 3 people on death row, and one other murderer. Case number 1 was a completely horrible human being. Threatened my life in high school, and I always figured he'd kill someone in a bar fight. Instead, him and 2 friends went, and he had one of them kill the husband, while he chased the wife down and shot her in the back. I was called to testify for the prosecution at his last death penalty trial. He was huge and scary as heck, and a truly, truly horrible human being. Based on the testimony I heard, he still is. The second was kind of an odd guy, but pretty nice in person. I played Starfleet battles with him. Him and a friend killed a lady. No idea why. He seemed more of a follower than a leader, and that's pretty much how the murder went down. He's still on death row. The third was more friends with my ex-wife. He even watched our kids a couple of times. He was quiet and seemed friendly. And finally, this other kid I knew in high school. He seemed pretty quiet, he read westerns a lot. Being a big book reader, I chatted a few times with him. He seemed nice. One day he took a shotty to school and at lunch blasted the guy convicted of taking advantage of his brother. He ended up getting a slap on the wrist for it. I felt he should have gotten a medal knowing the details that came out later. I suspect the judge gave him the least that he could. About 10 years before he took the lives of 2 women, he came to our house. He was about 16 or 17, on his bicycle with a chipmunk he had hung with a rope and was swinging it round and acting weird. My brother and I were home alone, and it was one time I know that my brother was scared in. We kept the doors locked, and he peed in our grill and left. The whole time he was yelling, but I'm not sure that it was at us. Yeah, that young man probably had a lot going on both in his home life and in his own head. So although you may have been on the receiving end of all that, he wasn't just angry at you. Cripes. A few years ago, I went to a gas station late at night and ran into an old friend. A guy I knew who had been serving time for some heinous crap. I heard he got out and him and I were cool, so I didn't think much of it. He was with another guy, and right away the sight of the two of them sitting outside a gas station at a payphone made me uneasy. Teardrop tattoos on their faces and a desperate look about them. But my friend recognized me right away and came to say what's up. His friend immediately asked for a few dollars to get a cigar. I told him, hold up and I'll get him on my way out. The whole time in that store, I felt uneasy. It looked like they were looking for a lick, and I didn't want that to be me. So I brought a cigar and gave him like $3. I chatted for about 5 minutes with my old friend and asked about his brother and stuff. As I hopped in my car, his friend asked if they could get a ride down the street. I got in and started the car and said, nah, can't. He started to insist, but my friend interrupted him and said, nah, my man has somewhere to be, he's got a bunch of kids that are probably crying. About 2 weeks later, 2 bodies were found smoldering along a popular jogging trail. The convicted murderer was the guy, along with my friend. The bodies were found within walking distance of the gas station I saw them at. My friend self-deleted about a month later. Both of those guys confessed to friends and family that they didn't know how to act outside of jail, and that they didn't feel like they were ready to be out. They tried to check themselves into psych hospitals, complaining of hearing voices, but they were turned away. The bodies were 2 high school kids who stole their neighbors' weapons and were trying to sell them quickly to get some green herb, I believe. These guys robbed the kids and tied them up for days. This all happened about 5 blocks from where I was living, in a relatively safe neighborhood in Florida. Oh, and the person with my friend was Jesse Davis, one of the convicted murderers in the Cady Way trial murders. I knew 2. They both grew up next door to one another. One had emotional problems and could be a decent guy one-on-one. We hung out a bit and rode bikes occasionally. He killed a guy in a substance deal and stuffed the body down a well. The other was a great guy, but he didn't give an F about anyone outside his circle of friends and his family. We had hunted and fished together every day. He once told me he couldn't feel remorse if he killed someone outside his family. I thought it was just talk. This year, his sister's husband started whacking her, and this guy ambushed him in a country road and blasted him to death. Still, a decent guy in my book. I knew a serial committer of the unspeakable act. He was my kid's assistant little league coach and a great dad, one of the coolest people I knew. He loved his kids, was at all of their events, and worked hard as a doctor to support his family. His arrest shocked the crap out of the whole neighborhood. My cousin went to school with Timothy McVeigh. She says he was a really creepy loner who'd talk about conspiracy theories all the time. Jonathan David Drew, convicted of taking the life of Houston waitress Tina Flood, 23, in December of 1998. Drew was pulled over by a police officer who found Flood beaten and barely alive in Drew's front passenger seat. She died soon afterwards. Drew was suspected of several instances of the unspeakable act, and a private investigator has speculated Drew could be responsible for the slaying of Jessica Lee Kane. A search of Drew's former home in League City, where his parents still lived, produced a vial containing several human teeth. Yep, Jonathan David Drew was good friends with several people I hung out with. I knew him as an acquaintance. There were stories of him getting stuck out in the killing fields on at least 2 occasions late at night and having to be towed out. He was only convicted of the one murder, but there is speculation he's responsible for several more. Not me, but a buddy of mine was friends with the Boston bomber at University of Massachusetts, Dartmouth. He says they used to hang out, drink, and do normal college stuff together. One of those you'd never expect it kind of situations. The thing that still gets me is that when he fled the scene, he briefly went back to Dartmouth to do whatever he had to do. But while there, he hit the gym with my buddy, and the story was all over every news outlet on TV. He turns to my buddy at the gym and proceeds to tell him, "How could anyone do something like this?" My sister's best friend growing up. Her family was really strict growing up, and she kind of took that on with her son. Wouldn't let him watch regular TV, he was homeschooled and that kind of thing. So she gets married because she got pregnant, again because she did this with her son's dad, and they move away. She joins the army, he cheats while she's at boot camp, they break up. Then she moves with other relatives in Oregon, and eventually he moves there too to be closer to his kid. Breaks it off with the other girl. They start to co-parent well and get along again. Everything's okay. They go on a camping trip in the mountains for his birthday with her sister. Then her and the sister proceed to shoot him 13 times while he slept and dragged and threw his body off a cliff. They come home to try and cover it up with all fake Facebook alibis and receipts from some gas station and say he got lost in the woods. The Rangers find him 2 days later, and 2 days after that she's arrested along with her sister. Her sister flipped on her immediately and they gave her 18 months with time served. The main perp got life without parole. She said she did it to make sure he couldn't take her kids away. Now the kids live with family and have lost both parents. I always knew that family was off. In short, my sister's best friend planned and killed her ex-husband to protect the kids, and then threw him off a cliff, was found and convicted, and kids have no parents now. Someone told me they made an episode of Snapped Off for her story. So yeah, I guess I can say the name of the episode. It's Patricia McCallum. Cripes. Protecting kids here may have been code for ensuring we don't have to share custody anymore. As much as being a child of divorce sucks, I can't imagine that the fallout of that was any better, and I can't imagine that the co-parenting was so bad that it was even worth the risk of getting caught. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I dated and was friends with a guy who was arrested in a huge CP bust in my area. We'll call him John. He was a very sweet and kind guy, the kind who'd do just about anything for a friend. We met at a class and we hit it off right away, which led to a sort of relationship. We split on good terms, he had different ideas about relationships, so we broke up before anyone got too involved. We remained very good friends who'd just hang out every weekend, spend some time at each other's houses, playing video games, or just get into general messing around. About 3 months later, he started dating a girl from his job and took her on vacation to New York City. They'd only been dating for a few weeks, but in true fashion, he was head over heels for her. He sent me a picture of them, and the girl looked so young, I asked if he saw her ID before they'd done the deed. He proudly told me she had just turned 19. He was 43. They split up after she'd spent the weekend at his place, and her father came looking for her. Her father went ballistic, and that was the end of it. I started putting the pieces together, and I realized I was looking at one gigantic red flag. I was 27 when we were dating, but he always loved to play up how young I looked. He was also very into age play during the deed, which was one of the reasons we split. He started dating other girls between the ages of 18 and 21, but they all had the same hallmark of definitely not looking like the age of consent, to the point that they were usually stopped from entering clubs or bars because the bouncers assumed the girls had fake IDs or borrowed an older relative's ID. He started drinking more, picking up working girls, going into massage parlors, and being all around that creepy old guy. He chalked it up to going through a rough patch, but there was something still very off about him. He went to New York City with another girl and asked me and another mutual friend to watch his house for the week. I got a frantic phone call from my friend saying that John's house had been broken into and all of his electronics were stolen. At the time, I was mid-move and John had allowed me to store several boxes of electronics at his place after the storage facility I had them in had been broken into. I went over and sure enough, all of John's TVs, computers, game systems, and other things were gone. But my things were left alone. I found that odd because I had a flat-screen TV and a flat-screen computer in their boxes sitting in his dining room. If he had been robbed, why didn't they take my things? When the cops showed up, all they'd tell us is that it wasn't a burglary, but wouldn't give us any more information. That's when I found the search warrant on his kitchen table. John came back from New York City and he asked me to drive him to the state trooper station. All he'd say was that he got a phone call asking him to show up there. Once there, he was immediately arrested. Like, they met us in the parking lot and yanked him out of my car before I had a chance to put it into park. One of the detectives asked me to come to the station and they interviewed me, asking how I knew him and so on and so forth. After about an hour, they let me go outside to have a cigarette. That's when they told me he was being arrested for 22 counts of downloading and distributing loads of CP. They also told me it had been going on for a very long time, long enough that surveillance on his house had pictures of me coming and going. So yeah, that's my story. Sorry it's so long. I dated someone who murdered a guy with his friends. It was personal and it made national news. A few months after he and I broke up, I was dating someone else. He called me and said that he was never going to be with me because he messed everything up. I was busy and I blew him off. A week later, after a holiday, I got a call from the jail, but it was at like 4 in the morning and I accidentally hung up. A few years later, I looked him up and realized the call was him. I'm afraid that he holds a grudge, and as his release creeps closer, I'm getting worried. So what was he like before? He was melodramatic. After we broke up, he called me and played Cry Me a River and told me that we were just like the song. He beat himself up quite a lot. Everything was a huge deal. We argued a lot and he was easily influenced. He didn't have a good relationship with his parents, so his friends were all he had. He had a history of disciplinary actions in school. Respect was a huge thing. Feeling disrespected to him was the worst thing in the world. He didn't care about school. He was funny. This guy isn't famous, not yet anyway. All this happened just about a month ago, maybe a little longer. The guy's name is Adam Densmore. He killed his girlfriend and cut her into pieces. He put the body in a couple of suitcases and took their 1-year-old daughter on the road. I always thought he was an intelligent guy, but apparently he wasn't the smartest, as he immediately drove from where he was living in Colorado to his hometown in northwest Louisiana, straight to his parents' house. He dropped the suitcases in 2 separate locations along the way. Someone found one of them and he was arrested. As far as I know, they still haven't found the other suitcase. I knew him, but not very well. We used to frequent the same bar. He'd sit in the corner with a beer and read. He was rude to anyone who tried to speak to him. He had that whole, "Can't you see I'm reading?" attitude. In most cases, I understand that attitude, but not in a bar. Never made sense to me. We talked a few times, but only talked at length once. I remember it being an enjoyable conversation. He was intelligent and well-spoken. Also, a good-looking guy, but not exactly charming. One thing I remember is that he'd say, "Gods," in place of, "Oh my God." I know he lived somewhere near me because I'd see him walking around the neighborhood on occasion with a big walking stick. So yeah, he was a bit of a strange guy, but I was shocked when I heard about what happened. It still feels weird to realize I know someone who would do something like that. Okay, mine wasn't famous, but it was still messed up. Brett Pearson was high on crystal and killed his mother and also injured his father. He cried crocodile tears and acts like he regrets it, but I knew him and I know for a fact that he doesn't regret a thing. I went to school with him for a few years. Myself and others were both repeatedly intimidated by him in both stalking and violent manners. There was just something off about him. The only friends he had were the problem kids and the major buttholes at school. He'd make super inappropriate comments in class towards teachers and joked about school mass tragedies and would say things just for shock value. But he was a charmer and got away with everything. I know for a fact he doesn't regret killing his mom. The murder happened only a few blocks from my house. I think the part of this that I'm having the hardest time relating to the rest was that he was apparently charming enough to get away with this stuff. But then again, Ted Bundy was a whole thing, wasn't he? So maybe this guy is the crystal-addicted version of him. Sounds like a creep. I'm glad he's put away now. Oh, and speaking of the big, charming, handsome psychopath himself, here he is in the next story. Obligatory not me, but my mum saw Ted Bundy running through the woods after he escaped prison. They realized who it was after the cops came searching door to door. Not directly, but I know several people who knew Willie Picton before he was arrested. I worked with a lady that had her husband murdered. She was a bossy, condescending, arrogant piece of white trash. Rather nicely attractive though, and very openly flirtatious. She was about 15 years older, but I'd be lying if I said I hadn't thought about it. Wasn't surprised when they finally nailed her for the crime. Everyone suspected she did it. I sat next to Jeffrey Dahmer at a bar in Milwaukee. I guess I just wasn't to his taste. My boyfriend and his friend kidnapped 2 people, drove them out to a field, and blasted them execution style. He was a really good guy except for that whole killing thing, but we were young and impulsive. I often think about reaching out to him, but time changes people, prison changes people, and I'm not quite sure what I'd say. I was taught in a pottery class by Margaret Bain and good friends with Stephen Bain when growing up in Papua New Guinea. I don't remember anything unusual about any of the family, but I remember vividly reading in the newspaper in Papua New Guinea about their deaths in New Zealand. Still not 100% clear whether it was just Stephen's dad or his brother as well that committed the murders. I didn't know the killer, but as adults, I met a guy and we became friends. It took him a few weeks to tell me he had changed his surname as everyone knew his brother, and he felt he'd be judged the same. At the time of the murder, it was classed as one of the most foul in Australian history. He told me even though his brother was locked up, he was scared of him, and he talked about the constant mental, physical, and other unspeakable treatment the children in the family had suffered growing up by his father and cohorts. His brother liked to do a lot of illegal stuff with animals, which was a forewarning of what he had become. I lost contact with my friend when he moved interstate, and I've tried to find him, because I miss him. I worked with the man who made national news for killing a doctor who worked in a clinic. When I knew him, he was quiet, polite, a nice guy as far as working with him, but he got in with the pro-life people, and if I recall correctly, he was having marital trouble at the time. One of his co-workers had asked him to work a shift for him that day, but he declined, saying he had something to do. Well, we all sure found out what he did. It was pretty shocking, really. Extended family member murdered 2 people and was suspected of murdering another. He and his mother and siblings lived with us for a few months when we were very young children, so young that I only have vague memories of this. It was while his mother was trying to leave her very nasty husband. The husband was a real animal and probably had something to do with the guy turning out the way he did. And what was our main character like? Well, as a young kid, he was just your typical child. Maybe enjoyed getting other people in trouble a bit more than most, but that's about it. As a teen and young adult, he was a very scary character. You'd get a real menacing vibe from him, like he was completely unpredictable. Which was strange because he always acted very calm. You just had this sense that there was way more going on under the surface. As a family member, I always felt safe around him. Strange to say that, I know, but I still always felt like he couldn't be trusted around others. Plus, even though instinctively I felt safe, rationally I knew most likely I wasn't. So I made sure I was never alone with him. You could tell there was something not quite right about him. We were all a little relieved when he died suddenly, still quite young. Eventually, he would have paroled out and someone else would have probably died. Gary M. Heidnick used to frequent a bar popular with veterans that my grandfather met his friends at a few times a month. He was usually quiet, and on Christmas Eve, my grandfather's friend brought the guy a beer and talked to him for a few minutes, thinking he might be a guy with PTSD. Came back and said, "There's a screw loose with that guy." Few weeks later, he got into a fight with someone, and my grandfather helped the bartender throw him out. He never came back. When did you walk out of a movie theater, and why? I worked at a theater in the late 80s, and we had Mystic Pizza. We didn't sell very many tickets to it, and then about 20 minutes in, most everyone would come out demanding their money back. The manager would wait at the door with passes filled out waiting for them. Never could figure out why everyone was so mad about that movie. What's so horrible about it? I've never really heard of it before, but it has a 6.2 on IMDb and a 78% on Rotten Tomatoes. It doesn't look like my cup of tea at all, but it also doesn't look like the kind of thing people would walk out of in droves. I've never seen it, but I believe Mystic Pizza is a pizzeria in Mystic, Connecticut. If people didn't know this, they might be expecting a movie about magical pizza, which sounds awesome. Dinosaur. I was screaming and crying because I was scared of the dinosaurs. My dad dragged me out of the theater. My dad brought me and my brothers to see Jurassic Park in the theaters at 9 p.m. After the T-Rex ate the lawyer, I spent the rest of the movie in the hall crying and terrified. I had nightmares for weeks. My dad and brothers watched the rest of the movie and didn't even check on me. Little girl sobbing in the hallway of a movie theater. Yep, good times. My dad, my 11-year-old sister, and my 21-year-old self thought it would be nice to take my grandma out to dinner and a movie for her birthday. There was a light-hearted comedy in theaters at the time about a grandson who fell on hard times and had to move in with his grandmother, and hijinks ensue. We took my super conservative 87-year-old Christian grandmother to see Grandma's Boy. I think we made it to the point where Alex tickles his pickle in the bathroom before Grandma loudly proclaimed everyone in the theater was going to hell and we had to leave. Still one of my favorite movies to this day. Always think about her when I watch it. I had a guy in high school take me to this on our first date, with his mother sitting right next to us. We got through the whole movie, uncomfortable as heck, and afterwards his mother was so angry. She ended up telling him that I was no good for him if I was able to sit through that filth. I was offended by that, so I took his virginity and dated him for a year. The narrator has now Googled this film, and he's not sure what's funnier. The fact that a solidly not good film is one of someone's favorites, or the fact that someone else lost their virginity to said same complete B-comedy film for green herb users. It's funny as heck, to be honest. It wasn't my choice, but when I was a kid, I went to watch Austin Powers' The Spy Who Shagged Me with my mum and my friend. My mum was already pretty disgusted with the movie during the first 20 minutes. The tipping point for her was when Fat Man was lying in bed with Heather Graham and she puts that little tracker thing up his butt. My mum got furious and said we weren't watching any more of it and we walked into Star Wars Episode 1 instead. Go figure. And I'll clarify, my mum doesn't speak English well, she's from Mexico, so she didn't know anything about the movie and doesn't know what shag means to this day. My parents walked me out of Jumanji as a kid because I couldn't emotionally handle Robin Williams getting hurt. I walked out of Captain America: The Winter Soldier. No, not because it's a bad movie, but because the popcorn machine exploded and the theater caught on fire. Fun times! I had to leave during Titanic. My friend that I was there with began crying hysterically once the ship began sinking and declared she couldn't watch the rest. I was kind of annoyed since it's not like it was a surprise that the ship was going to sink. I only left with her because she was simply inconsolable and making a scene at that point.
I saw that movie with my mom, who's from Mexico City, and surprisingly, this was a point of history that she had missed out on. The second I heard, "Hey, Stephen, the boat is sinking, and there are not enough lifeboats," was when I knew this was going to be a pretty rough cinematic experience for my mom. I watched it with my mom as well, and she's from Peru, and when the boat started sinking and the people started to drop, she started laughing hysterically. Everyone was gasping or silent, and here's this Latin lady laughing at the death of all these people because she thought it was funny how they dropped off and plopped into the water. These people are falling down. Watching that thing sink is the reason I did like that movie. The love story's generic as heck, and the old lady just sucks. But I could watch that boat sink all day. Plus, the propeller dude. Bless James Cameron for the propeller dude. Boom. I knew a guy who'd made 2 combat landings with the Marines in World War II, Saipan and Okinawa, and he had to walk out of Saving Private Ryan at the Omaha Beach scene. Oh man, here's my time to shine. So my wife and I have very different taste in movies. For example, she likes every single Hallmark Christmas movie, despite each one having the same fricking plot. Single but empowered woman stumbles into a new situation during Christmas, meets guy who is not her type but rocks her worldview. Christmas magic, fall in love. So we rarely see movies together because of this. Fury Road? Saw it by myself. The only good movie we've recently seen together was Inside Out because we both love Disney and Pixar films. Anyways, back in 2014, we decided to go on a double date with some friends of ours. I tell her she can pick the movie for once because I picked the restaurant, because we also differ on food tastes. She picks Endless Love. From the start, this movie is a train wreck. It's literally the most cliched piece of garbage some movie exec could think up. It's like they dumped every romance trope into a brainstorming meeting and the execs had a field day. Yeah, we'll cast this hot guy and this hot girl. The kids will like that. Hot people sell. Can they act? Who gives a crap? I mean, this thing just spirals out of frickin' control by Act 2. I can't remember all the details, but there's a terminal illness subplot that never gets resolved, and the main girl's brother, oh my. Here's something I do remember. The girl says, "I have no friends for my high school grad party because I'm too rich and goody-goody." The guy says, "So, good girl. I'm brooding, but I'll call the police on another party to get those people over to your party." The party starts, and the weird brother from college says, "I've got a cool college game to play. Let's draw songs out of a hat and you pick a partner and go off for a little bit and then come back and sing a duet of the song." I mean, who the frick has ever heard of that game? How is this a remotely fun party game? Anyway, the movie is bad. People are laughing at parts that aren't meant to be funny because it's so over-the-top drama acting. Near the end, my wife whispers to me, "I'm so sorry." Then it happens. One guy stands up and throws up his hands before leaving with his girlfriend following him out. The exodus has begun. Slowly, people start leaving. If they're not, it's because they're high school students probably making out in the back row. My wife even gets up to leave, and the other couple with us join her. She's shocked that I said that I'm staying. I'm now so enraptured in this piece of crap movie that I have to see how these dumb writers try to wrap things up. In the end, I finished the whole thing while they go to get coffee. When the lights come up, I stand and begin applauding to the shock of the 10 people left in the theater. I feel like I've been trolled by Hollywood. I now own 10 copies of this movie on DVD and I gift them out to friends solely to have someone else to talk about how bad this movie is.
You, sir, are a hero for your commitment to enjoying the garbage film that you paid for, and I'm sure every person in that theater remembered you for a long time afterwards. My only irritation is that you gave 10 DVDs worth of your money to it and might have contributed on a greater scale than most to Hollywood execs thinking that people wanted more of that kind of garbage in the future. What to expect when you're expecting. It wasn't what I expected. The third Twilight film. I was forced to go by my then-girlfriend. The cinema flooded about 40 minutes in, so we got evacuated. I was so happy. I walked out during Last House on the Left. Turns out, a rough scene of the unspeakable act is not what you want to see when two 16-year-olds go on a date. My first movie date with my ex was Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. I had heard all this hype about the book, so I was excited to see it. Yeah, no one told me about that scene either. Wow, that was a first date movie for me too. I left in that part because I had no idea there was that kind of scene, and the guy that I was on a date with was already way creepier in person than his texts had let on. It was not a good vibe. Walked out on Batman: The Dark Knight. The movie started and it was way too loud. Eardrum-burstingly loud. I know I wasn't the only one, because anytime there was a sound above two people talking, the entire theater would flinch or cover their ears. I went to the manager to let him know, and he sighed and said he'd take care of it. A few minutes later, the movie was turned down so quiet that you couldn't hear anyone talking. Every person in the audience would turn their head or lean in when it was quiet. So I let the manager know again, to which he sighed and angrily stomped off. I realized he wasn't sighing because some high school kid didn't know what he was doing. He was angry at me for bothering him. Went back in and the movie was louder than before. I said F it and demanded my money back. At first he refused, and then about 50 people showed up behind me, all demanding the same thing. I saw the movie the same day in another theater and it was perfect. Good movie. Heath Ledger was amazing. I wanted desperately to walk out of The Last Airbender, but that would have meant waiting outside in the rain for an hour for my mum to come pick me up. After finishing the film, I wish I'd sat in the rain. Gamer. My mum took me as a surprise, thinking it was going to be a perfect movie for me. I was in the 6th grade. No point in walking out. Once or twice I've decided to take a nap though. I rarely find the time for a good nap. Batman and Robin. We walked out and saw Men in Black. It was much better. A movie called The Fog. Ooh, the fog kills people. Then stay out of the frickin' fog. It's the 2005 one. Not to be confused with The Mist. If you haven't seen that, it's really good. Don't read anything about it, just watch it, and then maybe report back after. Holy crap, everyone keeps talking about how good The Mist was, and I've been thinking, what? That movie was so bad. Nothing in the movie was good except for when the credits rolled. I think I've been thinking about The Fog the entire time. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. The opening night for The Dark Knight Rises. It wasn't the movie itself, which I loved, but there was this one Joker that messed it up for everyone. I'll never understand why people can't sit down, shut up, and let everyone else watch the movie they've paid for. Anyway, this guy must have seen the movie in advance and kept loudly dropping spoilers. I specifically went to the premiere because I wanted to see it before anyone else had a chance to ruin it for me by telling me what happened. So I cut my losses, left, and came back to watch it the next night. I thought this was going in a much darker direction. Same here, I was braced for it. After messed it up for everyone, I was like, oh crap. In case anyone needs an update on tragic film events from 12 years ago, there was a premiere of The Dark Knight Rises where, unfortunately, someone decided to bring in several weapons and commit a massacre in one of the screenings. The narrator will also admit to getting nervous that the author was speaking about that event. Oof. My friend's dad took us to see South Park, bigger, longer, and uncut. He decided it was too vulgar for us about 20 minutes in, we were 12, and he decided to take us to Hooters instead. 9 out of 10 would do again. Super Babies, Baby Geniuses 2. I was with a friend who was desperate to see it for some frickin' reason. About 40 minutes into it, I reached my limit. I stood up and said, I'll be outside having a smoke, see you when it's over. Rude? Maybe, but I really couldn't handle one more second of that crap fest. Wife and I went to see Daredevil.
Turns out we accidentally went into the wrong theater, which was showing How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days. We were both looking at each other thinking, this is an awfully strange opening to Daredevil. Once we figured it out, we left and went to the right theater, but in retrospect, we should have just stayed where we were. Not me, but my mom walked out of the first Matrix. She and my aunt had no idea it was a sci-fi movie, and at the beginning of the scene in the car where they rip the thing out of Neo's chest, these two burst out laughing and left the theater. It's hard to remember through 16 years of knowing all about what the Matrix is, but it was because of marketing. They specifically made the previews just showing action, but no explanation. What is the Matrix was the catchphrase. If you're of the right frame of mind, this really worked for you. My friend said I had to see it back in '99 when we went. When Neo woke up in that pod, my fricking head exploded. It's like the Darth Vader and Skywalker thing. I had a rare afternoon off while on tour in Paris, and I decided to see a movie. I brought the ticket, brought some popcorn, sweets, a big drink, and other things. I walked into the theater, sat down, and then promptly got back up again and walked out. In a moment of blithering stupidity, I totally forgot I was in Paris and the movie was in French. I can't speak French. When the 6th Harry Potter movie came out, we had to pretty much drag my friend to see it. He's a military guy who hates fantasy movies. I was shocked he even agreed to go, albeit reluctantly. One of the first lines of the movie was, "Okay, Harry, wand at the ready," and he loudly scoffed. About 10 minutes into the movie, while Harry and Dumbledore were attempting to recruit Slughorn, a lone chair sat in the room of an empty house. I whispered to my friend, "He's the chair." His response was, "If he's the chair, I'm leaving." Sure enough, Dumbledore prodded the chair with his wand. Slughorn's head popped up, exclaiming, "Merlin's beard!" And my friend kept his word. I remember thinking that the movie was alright, and I saw it as an adult, but gosh darn if that description doesn't make it sound like the stupidest thing imaginable. I once took a girl on a first date to go and see The Aristocrats, the Paul Provenza documentary about the alleged dirtiest joke ever told. Personally, I love that stuff, but she was so thoroughly unimpressed that I felt embarrassed after the first 30 minutes and we left. She didn't laugh, smile, or say anything from the start of the film until I dropped her off at her place. We never spoke again. I actually got to meet Paul Provenza a few years later and told him the story. He thought it was pretty funny and gave me some great advice. He said roughly the equivalent to, "Don't sweat it. If a girl can't laugh at something like that, she's not the right one for you anyway." A few years after that, I watched it again with my then-girlfriend, and we both laughed non-stop through the whole thing. She's now my wife. In short, first date disaster watching The Aristocrats. Watched it again later in life with a new girlfriend and then married her. I had to walk out on Passion of the Christ when my sister threw up in the middle of the movie. There was a priest in the theater, and his reaction to it had me in more stitches than Jesus on my way to the car. It's so surreal watching that movie when it came out in theaters packed with uber-religious folks who were watching it as if it were a documentary. At one of the points where Jesus was getting beaten to a pulp, this weeping woman in the movie theater cried out, "You B-words." I had to stifle laughter because it made me think of South Park. I was the cause of a guy walking out of a movie once. His name was Mark, and the movie theater was the Marquee. So for the rest of middle and high school, anytime we wanted to leave early, we'd ask to pull a Marquee Mark. Thought I was on a date with a girl, and she ended up inviting Mark because they'd been talking as well. I ended up going for the handhold during the movie. Middle school, I know. He saw this, called his mother, and got up saying he was going to the bathroom and never came back. Best part of this was my other friend who drove us had to sit through it to drive me home, and Marky Mark is some guy none of us know and had to deal with the whole situation and awkward rejection. She broke up with me 2 days later because I exited the window she was browsing during computer class as a joke. How is that a joke? I don't know either, so don't bother asking. She seemed like the rational type anyway. This was the most middle school story that has ever middle schooled. I'll admit that up until my first reread, I didn't catch your part about middle school, and my imagination was afire thinking that this was just the most hilariously childish workplace or college class in the world. Oh well, hopefully we will get a story of that nature sometime in the future. Dad and I went to see War of the Worlds. I thought it was really dull, so I looked over to see if Dad thought the same so we could leave. And he looked properly into the film, so I didn't say anything and watched the rest of it. Afterwards, Dad said that he was glad that I enjoyed the film as he hadn't and wanted to leave. He had done the same thing that I'd done and thought I was enjoying it. I never walked out even if the movie was crap. $10 and more for a ticket I'll fricking endure. I do know about the sunk cost fallacy. I guess I just never experienced a movie so bad that I wanted to leave the theater. You're all talking about wasting time, but if you go to the movies in the first place, you probably had some time to waste anyway. If you absolutely hate it, then fine, go get a refund. Marley and Me. The only movie I've ever walked out on, and it was because I was sobbing like a B-word towards the end with 15 to 20 minutes left to go, and I couldn't stand to watch another minute of that emotional torture. The fourth Indiana Jones film. I walked out and went into Speed Racer and walked out of that too. It was a bad day at the cinema. I didn't walk out. I would intentionally go to see terrible movies. Why? I won 52 free tickets one year, and when my girlfriend at the time would do her photography classes, I'd go and see a bad movie in an empty theater and kill 2 hours by sleeping in the cinema if there was nothing good out that I hadn't seen already. The weekend staff got to know me and would tell me which movie had the least tickets sold so I wouldn't be disturbed. The Box, starring Cameron Diaz and James Marsden. It was aggressively nonsensical. I saw that movie with a friend and her whacked-out group for my friend's birthday. They were the typical teenagers making noise with their phones all out. No one in the half-full theater complained. Some people joined us and a couple of people walked out. Yep, 2 weeks' notice. I was a teenager with my first serious girlfriend. The movie was an excuse to get together. We bought tickets to show the stub if asked by parents. We walked in and stood up and left 10 minutes later to go make out in the car. No idea if the movie was any good, but I got to see a naked girl in person for the first time that night, so I rate it as one of the best movies of all time. This is hands down the best reason to walk out of a movie theater. Wild Hogs. I don't feel that an explanation is warranted. That Frankenstein movie with Sting in it. Walked out and I saw Weird Science instead. Yeah, I'm old. Napoleon Dynamite. I saw it with my family over Thanksgiving holiday and walked out about halfway through thinking we wasted our money. Woke up the next day and couldn't stop quoting it, so we went and saw it again. Now it's one of my favorites. My dad walked out of the cinema during Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone because it was, in his words, complete bollocks. I almost walked out of The Lady in the Water, but it was just so bad that we couldn't leave. I walked out once. It was during the Ender's Game movie. I'm able to separate my movie experience from when I read a book, but this movie was so horrible. It was appalling that it went by the same name. It doesn't help that Ender's Game and its ensuing series were some of my favorite books. I couldn't stand to watch another minute of it. I understand the merits the movie has. I also try to separate the movie and the book as much as possible when I watch them. However, I read Ender's Game and Speaker for the Dead 3 days after my grandfather, who loved them, died. Those books were an escape for me. In another low point of my life, I read the Bean sub-series, and that series is the only one to make me cry. I am unabashedly attached to these books, and I couldn't stand the movie. Overthinkers. What was your most satisfying "told you so" moment? My boyfriend, who has zero history of seizures, narrowly escaped dying from one because my overthinking led me to break into his house when he didn't answer the phone. My overthinking had begun a few nights prior. He mentioned that he bit his tongue in his sleep and woke up with a bloody pillow and sore mouth, but he had no memory of it happening. That, for some reason, led my overthinking brain to question, wow, did he have a seizure and just not realize it? He has zero history of seizures, and we'd been together multiple years. Didn't live together, but spent nights together. And I had never seen a hint of a seizure. But for some reason, this stuck in my mind. Fast forward 2 days. We usually don't hang out in the morning because he likes to sleep in late. But on this day, we had an appointment to go and see a specific dog at the shelter that I was thinking of adopting. He wouldn't answer the phone that morning. I called multiple times before I went to his place, but he never picked up. I started getting a bad feeling, but I quelled the "he's having a seizure" thought because that was so clearly unlikely, and meanwhile I was making an action plan for that very scenario. I got to his house and he wouldn't answer, so in a completely not me crazy girlfriend move, I climbed over his fence. Luckily, his door was unlocked. I found him unconscious and unresponsive, lying on his back with the sticky remnants of foam all around his mouth. I jumped into action. I rolled him on his side to help curb aspiration, put a pillow under his shoulder to keep him in that position, and called the ambulance. Had I not hopped the fence to get in? Had I not driven over when he didn't pick up the phone? Had we not had plans to meet up hours earlier than we usually did? He would have been dead by lunch. His kidneys were already shutting down by the time we reached the ER. If he had never mentioned biting his tongue in his sleep, I don't think I would have been overthinking at all. No crazy worries about seizures would have pushed me to go over the edge and find him. Turns out to be a weird brain disease that's bizarrely endemic to New Mexico, kind of cerebral cavernous malformations. Several days later, after we got home from the hospital, I got a call from a friend who said the dog, against all odds, was still at the shelter, as in the very dog we were supposed to be seeing that day. I'd given up hope on getting her and pushed it out of my priorities while my boyfriend was hospitalized, but they'd forgotten to take down my 24-hour hold sign on her cage, so no one inquired about her. She's now our miracle dog and is the sweetest animal I've ever owned. My boyfriend wouldn't be alive today if we hadn't made an appointment to meet her. Is this going to be that category of video that turns us all into paranoid weirdos? Because if there are more stories like this, my head is going to be on a fricking swivel and interpreting any physical irregularities in my friends as grave medical conditions. I always carry a small sewing kit whenever I go to a wedding. I've sewed 2 brides into their dresses so far. I worked weddings for a while, during an age, 26 to 28, where a lot of my friends were getting married. I've helped to bustle pretty much every bride whose wedding I attended, including brides who I didn't know very well, who were either friends of my husband or were getting married to a groom that I was close friends with. At work, I had one of those craft supply organizers full to the brim of emergency supplies, pins, safety bobby and straight pins, hair ties, earring backs, a sewing kit, pain relievers, Tums, and granola bars. Sometimes you just need to get the bride to eat something. Chalk works great for covering up minor stains on white dresses, hairspray, makeup remover wipes, superglue band-aids, blister bandages, you name it. People were always pleasantly surprised when they needed something random, and I was just like, yep, I've got that, here you go. All the teachers at the middle school I taught at knew that I was a pack rat, and one day a kid split his pants, and the school counselor came to me and said, "Mr. Smith, would you happen to have a pair of sweats or gym pants in your truck?" Yep. So the kid spent the rest of the day in a pair of nylon pants I had behind my seat. He's lucky, because if he didn't fit, he would have spent the rest of the day in a white disposable coverall in case I had car trouble in nice clothes. The icing on the cake, it was a student I really liked who was super helpful to other kids and teachers, so it was nice to do something nice for him. I also carried a Swiss Army brand soft-side briefcase stuffed with a few of each size of every battery. One day, Phil Niekro and 2 Braves players were there for an assembly and Phil's mic battery was dying, so I sprinted upstairs to my classroom, grabbed a 9-volt from my bag, and then basically rolled across the panel and switched out his battery and got back to the PA, avoiding getting on TV news cameras. I was at one of those trampoline parks with my kid when I looked over and saw several of the workers attending to an elderly lady sitting on the floor. It turns out she'd taken a shot to the forehead somehow and was bleeding profusely. They were trying to help with paper towels. Well, I'd taken a free local Stop the Bleed class, just in case, and I've since kept supplies in my truck. I asked if they needed some gauze and a bandage and went and got it and brought it back. I told the guy, now, if one piece of gauze fills up, and he interrupted, take it off and put on a new one. And I said, no, you put another one over top that one but leave the bottom one there. And he said, well, you know more than I do. Come over and help. And we were able to get her patched up. If anyone else wants to take a 90-minute Stop the Bleed class, they're free and likely in your local area. Stay safe out there, guys. I didn't actually plan for this, it just worked out. But one day, for some reason, I put a suction cup in my pocket. I don't exactly remember why, it was from a shower hook that I think I broke, and I put it in my pocket hoping to find a replacement or something else. Later that day, I was standing around with a few friends, and one friend was lamenting that his bumper was dented. He showed us and said, I bet I could pop it right out if I had like a suction cup or something. I wordlessly pulled the suction cup out of my pocket and handed it to him. Everyone definitely thought I was creepy as heck. Not me, but my mother. Apparently at a party where my parents and their friends were playing board games, there was a realization that an hourglass was missing from one of the games they planned on playing. My mother proceeded to reach into her purse and pull out an hourglass she just so happened to bring, on the off chance they didn't have one. However, later in the night, when some drinks had been had, someone accidentally slammed a drink down, breaking my mother's hourglass. Without missing a beat, she reached into her purse and pulled out another hourglass. She knew the first one, being glass, might get broken, so she had a backup ready. Imagine how the guy who wanted to go home felt when he broke the hourglass and suddenly there was another one, especially after hitting the very first one. When my son was still a baby, we had to take an 11-hour flight. As an overthinker, I bought at least 25 diapers for him to go through. He didn't need that many. But the mum sitting close to us was very grateful when she ran out of diapers, not even halfway through the flight, and I gave her a few. Ah yes, the little brown fountains never let up below a certain age. I was kinda shaken when my friends told me how quickly they went through one big pack. New parents, you're truly living through your own version of the Blitz every day. It's just that what's raining down against you is more liquid. This was at 9 years old. We'd driven home and seen the beginning wisps of smoke for the California Cedar Fire in 2003. Naturally, I assumed the worst and packed up all of my clothes and spent about an hour making a travel cage for my guinea pigs. I tied their water bottle to the side so they could drink, packed up their food and their favorite furniture just in case. I then spent the next few hours monitoring the fire on the news and out in the distance from our window, periodically asking my parents if we needed to evacuate. At some point in the night, the fire sped up like crazy and was literally on the hillside across the street. I went into my parents' room and said, "The fire is across the street, are you sure we shouldn't evacuate?" At this point, we all went crazy grabbing important documents and supplies as we were about to lock the doors and drive, and then I realized I forgot my guinea pigs. My parents told me it was too late and I didn't have time to grab them, but when I cried and explained I had them packed up, I was able to grab them and go. The house ended up okay thanks to a neighbor putting out embers before they took, but we were gone for a long enough time that my pigs wouldn't have made it without feeding. In short, I helped save my family and pets from a fire because I was an anxious child. Jeez, you were a smart 9-year-old. When September 11th happened, my brother, who was 5 at the time, began packing a bag in case we had those kinds of people attack us. He packed the essentials like his teddy bears, a VHS copy of The Phantom Menace, his favorite toy cars, and a random book my dad was reading. He would have single-handedly saved Western civilization. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I've never told anyone this, but when I was in middle school and going through puberty, I used to be terrified of popping a stiff one and my fly being down accidentally. Like, I would be up in front of the class and then randomly get solid and it would just pop out my fly, in front of the whole class. It's making me laugh just typing this out. You know that episode of South Park where Jimmy keeps getting randomly rigid? That was basically my life. Usually I'd just tuck it in my waistband and wait for the storm to settle, but I still had a huge fear of it popping out my fly because I forgot to zip it up. So what did I do? I started wearing my boxers backwards, so that even if I forgot to zip up my fly, my eggplant wouldn't be exposed. It was a pain to use the urinals, but honestly, I got used to it pretty quickly. Flash forward a couple of months, and I was at the movies with a big gathering of people. It was basically a big group of girls and my group of guy friends. Each guy and girl were paired up and made sure to sit next to each other. I was paired with a girl I had a huge crush on. We shared a popcorn and soda, and it was a huge moment for me. Briefly into the movie, I got one of those damn random rock-hard Richards, and I quickly but discreetly stood up and did the old waistband tuck. Then I sat back down, and I could feel it pop out through my zipper. Thankfully, my backwards boxers kept it from saying hello to my date, but I still panicked and had to cover it up in a hurry. She noticed, I think, but we can all agree that a 6th grade boy's upright Johnson hiding under a layer of underwear is better than just sprouting out bare in the middle of a crowded movie theater. Also, she never said anything to her friends about it. Shout out to Stephanie for not mocking me with her friends. Went through a stage as a teenager where I thought I was psychic. I know, stupid. A friend asked me jokingly to make a prediction. I told him to get a flashlight because tomorrow would be dark. I grabbed one myself when I got home and put it in my purse. No idea why, just did it. The next day, the Eastern Seaboard blackouts happened. He still asks for predictions to this day. I was supposed to get married at the end of May last year. At the beginning of the year, before any of the pandemic stuff happened, I became obsessed with thinking about all the things that could go wrong and how we'd lose our money spent on the event. As a result, I purchased a very high coverage insurance policy for the event. As luck would have it, this kind of insurance had no clause that prevented collecting if there was a pandemic. We got all of our money back. I'm also a germaphobe, so I already stockpiled masks, gloves, Lysol wipes, and hand sanitizer. In college, on occasion, upperclassmen would randomly steal the underclassmen's towels from the shower stalls and then lock their room doors, so they had to go to the RA undressed. I had the idea to stash a towel in the drop-ceiling tiles for just that event. Maybe a week later, I became the victim of a towel snatching. However, the upperclassmen were very unhappy to see me strut out with a nice clean towel from my ceiling stash. That is such a specific thing to be paranoid about and prepared for, but what do I know, I guess, because you were able to actively save yourself from some embarrassment. They either thought that you were a fricking magician or that you carried 2 towels into the shower. I carry a fire extinguisher in my automobile. I witnessed a car accident where the engine caught fire. I quickly put it out before it burned the inside of the car. Everyone survived. I always keep an unopened deck of cards in my backpack. You can never tell when some hold'em may be needed to pass the time. But when I was at a business conference, the bigwig who was presenting to us was having to wing it with a few things because his luggage had been lost, and he didn't have all of his materials. He had the PowerPoint deck, but he didn't have his props. He started going into explaining how he'd be able to demonstrate his statistical principle he was describing, only he didn't have the unopened deck of cards he needed. Voila! I was able to produce a shrink-wrapped deck of cards. My boss was also in the same presentation, and he was also impressed that I just happened to have a deck of cards on me, so that's nice too. I found a nickel-sized lump on my 15-month-old daughter's temple. I freaked out, obsessed over it, researched it exhaustively, and concluded that it was a dermoid cyst that had worn through the skull. I was told by a pediatrician that it was a bone bruise that would fix itself over the course of 3 to 6 months. No imaging was needed, and I shouldn't make an appointment at the children's hospital because it would resolve on its own. I got an X-ray done anyway, and the radiologist confirmed every one of my suspicions, but the pediatrician still said to wait and see because that's what you do with dermoid cysts, and it was definitely not through the skull despite what the radiologist said. Made an appointment at the hospital anyway, and the surgeon swore up and down that although it was a dermoid cyst as I'd suspected, it would not be through the skull, since in all of his years of practice it never had been. Well, guess what? It was through the skull, and it was pressing on the membrane between the skull and the brain, a hair's breadth from breaking the membrane or pressing on the brain. A couple more weeks of waiting, and my daughter would have had seizures, a brain infection, and lasting damage. I overthought it, and now she's a happy, healthy 3-year-old. I carry scissors in my glove compartment. They came in handy when a kid tightened a skinny zip tie around my 9-year-old daughter's finger at a park, completely cut off the circulation. Also, the other kid's mum was a nurse, so that was helpful too. Carry scissors and a nurse at all times. One time, I way overthought a concern I had around dryer vent fire. When the time came that we had a clog and didn't know, and there was a wee burst of flames, I was fricking ready. To add, I did clean the lint trap religiously. I just had a gut feeling. I bought one of those things from Amazon to clean it and nothing came out, so don't let that fool you. If your drying times are up and there's sometimes a smell, call someone or check out every possible location. We found basically Brillo pads of burnt hair inside the heating element. Stay safe, pals. I'm an amateur clarinetist. I've played in the local orchestra and the like. My son was in the high school band, he also plays clarinet. Prior to a football game at the warm-up area, he called me as I was about to head to the game, saying that someone in his section had a problem with their instrument. So did I have a loner? Now, the thing about being a clarinet player is that everyone you know calls you every time they see a cheap plastic clarinet for sale at a garage sale or the like. So over the years, especially when my son was in junior and senior high, when I saw one of those for $50 or $100, I grabbed it. Didn't happen every day, but at the peak of my collection, I had a couple of beta plastic clarinets in addition to the pretty good wooden one my son played. And Lord knows that I wouldn't trust anyone with my good clarinets in the brass band or the one that I used in the orchestra. So I grabbed both of my plastic ones, which actually played okay, and I brought them. I pulled the one I thought was the better of the two out of the car and gave it to my son's friend. Meanwhile, he says, "Hey, another person ran into a problem, and I got the second clarinet out of the car." "How many clarinets do you have?" was my son's question. It was a proud moment. Injuring my dominant hand. As a kid, I had an irrational fear of having it chopped off. I spent all of grade 6 teaching myself to write and do stuff with my left hand. I made a conscious effort to remain as ambidextrous as possible. As an adult, I broke a few fingers on my dominant hand, but it wasn't a big issue because I could still do most things equally with my left hand. Anticlimactic, but it was useful. I bought and learned to use a Slim Jim, which opens locked cars. I carry one in my car, and I've been able to help no less than 10 people who've locked their keys in their car. My brother was visiting me from out of town, and he needed something from Target. He called me and said an elderly man had locked his keys in his car, and I was able to drive over and help. Also, I have jumper cables that have helped a few stranded drivers start their car. My goodness, good for you? But it's a little concerning that there's apparently a universally effective and commercially available product that can get cars open that easily. Does every carjacker know about it? Great to be prepared and have one in your garage, I guess, but don't go getting ideas, car thieves. Getting lost in a foreign country, relying on my phone's GPS to navigate, and the data stops working. I'd over-prepared and memorized the map of the downtown area ahead of time. I'm basically blind without my glasses, and I've always taken a backup pair of glasses when I travel. It went untouched for years, taking up valuable space in my luggage. Lo and behold, one trip to Montreal a few years ago, and I just woke up one morning to find my glasses broken. No idea how it happened. And I finally got the chance to break out my backup pair. When I was 11, I always kept approximately 12 to 15 of some combination of pens, pencils, and markers in my pant pocket. I just liked having options and never knew what I was going to need to write on. Sometimes I got side-eye from other kids though. Cut to, at a weekend camp with a bunch of kids. I'm participating in a sort of scavenger hunt race thing. At one point, our team hits this task where everyone has to draw or write something. I don't really remember. But there's only 2 pens, about 10 people per team, and another team just showed up. With 1 pen assigned to each team, it was going slowly until, you get a pen, you get a pen, everyone gets a pen. Our team screams through the task because we can all write simultaneously, while the other team's left plodding along with their 1 pen. We eventually win. Who's weird now? For those concerned about cheating, I do believe the lack of pens was oversight by the event planners, not a deliberate means of handicapping teams. There was a staff member monitoring that particular station and they didn't intervene. Our victory was sanctioned and still stands. Some other people have expressed concerns over the possibility of my getting impaled by all these writing utensils. Rest assured that this 100% has happened to me. I have absolutely impaled legs and fingertips multiple times. It's always terrible. Not me overthinking, but one time when my girlfriend and I were going to the gym, she packed me 2 spare shirts. I made a joke that it was unnecessary to bring 2, as it's not like I was going to explosively crap myself or something and ruin the spare shirt and need a second spare. We laughed it off, but she brought 2 anyway. After changing from my sweat-soaked shirt to a spare upon walking home, a bird craps all down me, ruining the shirt I was wearing. I was so thankful that she had brought an additional spare, so now I do not question the quantity of what she decides to bring anywhere. How did life totally change when you came out of a coma? I was in a coma for 2.5 months in 2015 when I was 27, following a serious car accident. When I woke up, I still had a tracheotomy and couldn't speak. I don't remember a darn thing from the time I was in a coma, but what blew my mind is when I woke up, my new boyfriend at the time was standing there with my parents and they were chatting to each other like they knew each other. I'm a very private person and had made every effort for them not to know of him, so I found this disturbing. I also had no recollection of the accident for months, and for a week or 2 after waking up, I had to be retold where I was and what had happened every time I dozed off and woke up. I had no idea where I was and thought I was 23, not 27, for months. I also had a really hard time recognizing faces. Like I'd see people who I knew, but I couldn't remember why or their names or anything. They'd just look familiar. One time, about a month after I'd woken up, my parents took me in the hospital bed for a walk.
in the courtyard of the hospital. We passed a large mirror in the lobby and I freaked out. I saw my reflection and I knew it was me because I recognized my parents pushing me, but I didn't recognize my own face. There were no injuries to my face or anything, I just didn't recognize myself. I was horrified because I had imagined myself much better looking because I had some pictures of me and my friends in my hospital room. In hindsight, it was probably just that I looked sickly and had no makeup and my hair was crazy. I also had the brain injury stare, which is hard to explain but basically a blank look in the eyes. I'd lost about 50 pounds while in the coma, not a diet I would recommend, because I had extensive bowel and stomach injuries, but oddly my face looked really puffy and fat. I also felt that I looked way younger than I was, and I found my forehead and cheeks were larger than I remembered. It also blew my mind that I'd gone into the coma in late winter, and there was quite a bit of snow on the ground, and when I woke up, it was spring and there was no snow. I had a large window in my hospital room. The news that shocked me the most was the fact that my parents had gone in and packed up my entire apartment. Like I mentioned, I was super private, and the idea that they went in there and boxed up all of my stuff and gave up my lease was hard to grasp. Obviously, it made sense, but I was still troubled by it. When I was a kid, I was messing around in our house that was under construction. I fell through the open floor to the floor below. My brother saw me land on my head and called 911. I woke up the next day watching TV and eating Teddy Grahams in the hospital. Then I don't remember anything until a few days later when I was at home. My parents said I was never unconscious because I was complaining the entire time and I was able to eat and use the restroom on my own, but I don't remember a thing. I'm now colorblind, where I have a hard time seeing green. It comes across as blue, gray, or brown most of the time. Yellow and purple are also hard for me. I didn't actually realize I was colorblind for a few years. I found out that the type that I have can be caused by head injuries. Cripes, I can't believe there are kinds of color that can be screwed up for you if you bonk your head hard enough. The CPUs inside our skulls really just are so intensely complicated. So, I don't know if this counts, because it was only 3 weeks, but I was so shaken when someone put on the TV and it was a newsreel about a festival in a town over. I wasn't even going to go. I just felt so weird because this was still like 3 weeks away in my head, you know? This can't be on TV. Did I just miss 3 whole weeks? Like, holy crap, what the hell happened? I was in a coma? Oh yeah, something bad happened to me. What was it that happened? Explosion? I'm not going to go into the details of the accident, but it was an explosion on the work floor that threw a piece of metal straight towards me. Tried to catch it in my arms and then my face. Didn't catch it. The wall did though, and it had a huge hole in it. Still don't know how I didn't die that day. It destroyed my upper and lower jaw, my arm, pinky, and burned most of my limbs. Mostly second-degree burns, so that wasn't really a problem. The problem was the jaws and the arms. My jaws were completely shattered into more than 100 pieces. The doctor told me he had to put pieces of bone in random places because he couldn't find the right spot they came from. I lost most of my teeth, about 3/4 of them. My lower lip was ripped off and was just hanging by one blood vessel and a few nerves. After 10 years, I still don't have all the feeling back, but that's the new normal, so I don't really notice anymore. And the arm was broken on the lower half, both bones snapped like little trees, and one of the bones sticking out of a gaping wound. Fun times. My wife was in a medically induced coma, which is really just heavy sedatives and paralytics for 13 days. She had complications from a bilateral lung transplant. The hardest part for her was that she had very realistic dreams during where she went home and came back to the hospital. So the first few times they woke her up, reducing the medications to check for neurological function, she was fairly panicked. So I got into the habit of telling her the daytime and location each time they woke her, letting her know that she was safe. It was extra hard on her as she was on a ventilator and restrained, so she couldn't communicate what she wanted to know. Interestingly, we were often able to tell what part of the dream responded to different events of her stay in the ICU. That was in February. She still has to sometimes ask if things she remembers really happened or if they were part of the dreams. Good news, she's home now, nearly fully recovered with just some mild kidney problems that are getting better and some neuropathy in her left leg. She's able to walk with a walker and do a lot of things on her own again. So I'm not a coma patient, but when my husband came out of a long period of unconsciousness in the hospice, he thought that the footstool was a dog and kept patting it. We all played along and called it a good boy for the rest of the time there. Oh my god, when my sister ended up in the hospital with an accidental poisoning, it freaked the staff out that she kept thinking random things were animals. She wouldn't drink her water because it had fish in it, or she'd randomly start petting her pillow and calling it a cat. I didn't sweat it though. If her water had fish in it, I'd let them go in the sink and get her a new glass. I brought her a stuffed cat plush to pet. Luckily, she was only like that for 2 weeks and she doesn't remember any of it. Not me, but my niece was in a medically induced coma for 3 weeks after doing crystal and frying her heart. She says that she could remember hearing her mum and dad in the room during a couple of the points, and that her anesthesia was lightened at about 1 week in as an attempt to wake her up. She was aware of it but didn't become conscious. She said that it was like being underwater, so you can sort of hear what people are saying, but not fully understand. She was extremely surprised and confused when she finally came to, and couldn't believe that she was out for so long. The last thing she remembers was snorting what she thought was white snow and then her boyfriend calling 911. She's insanely lucky to be alive, but will live with the consequences of this for the rest of her life. She has permanent damage to her heart and will likely die if she does anything like that again. Does 3 weeks count as a long time? I was in a motorcycle accident and was out for 3 weeks. Woke up as the person I am today, not really as the person I was before, although I do have a few of his memories. I found out that my hippocampus was damaged, so that accounted for the memory loss. I woke up remembering a lot of school stuff and things I'd read before, but had a very hard time remembering or knowing people. Didn't totally recognize my dad, had no idea who my mum was. I was apparently dating a really pretty girl, but I have no idea who she was and no memory of her. We tried to make it work, but it was too weird and the old me was too different from the new me, and I felt no connection to her. I did become really good at philosophy and logic after I woke up and ended up going to college to study it. I've got a year left before I can lecture in it as well, so I guess that's a plus. It's still weird sometimes that people approach me and greet me. They know so much about me, but I have no idea who they are. I usually have to explain to them what happened, and things get a little weird sometimes, but I usually end up making or remaking a friend. I'll say that we've got a few comas that are in the ballpark of 3 weeks. Perhaps that's our standard factory reset setting, or the longest time that a hospital will put you on a induced coma. On a more serious note, we think of ourselves as so permanent and our souls as such a set thing, but my gosh, it feels like we can have major parts of ourselves rewritten by one bash to the head. Good for this guy and his newfound logical proficiencies. Good luck in your philosophy PhD, I guess. My grandpa's biggest shock waking from a coma was the news that he wasn't in Spain. He was hit by a car near his house in England, and a lot of the nurses in the ITU were Spanish, and he caught their accent and thought that sometimes they spoke to each other in Spanish. They weren't meant to, we don't care. He had excellent care anyway. And maybe when he started opening his eyes briefly, he saw their skin tone. He couldn't understand how he had got to Spain. When he was coming around, he was getting distressed. We kept telling him he was okay. He was in hospital and the tube was helping him breathe. We forgot to share the news of, "You have not left the country." He was also shocked to find his feet hadn't been amputated, his feet and ankles weren't injured, about the only bit of him which wasn't, but somehow, in the coma, he thought they were. When fully conscious, he was shocked at the football results. I was in a coma for about 3 or 4 days after an intentional OD on Ambien, regular antidepressants mixed with some alcohol. I was more or less just unconscious, but I remember the first time I woke up, it was exactly like those movies where you're flashing in and out, and there are disembodied voices everywhere and people working on you. It was very weird. I remember waking up a few times once I was out of critical condition, mainly to throw up from the Narcan. Apparently, I had a seizure, I had cyanosis, blood was coming out from my mouth and my nose, my blood sugar dropped below survivable, and then just shot up into diabetic coma zone after a glycerin shot. I was severely underweight, and I guess they didn't take that into account. I had a breathing tube for most of the time. When I woke up, all I knew was that my throat was very sore and my entire body felt like actual chewed-up garbage. Other than that, I had no clue what happened. I just remember taking everything and falling asleep, and that was that. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I can tell you that it isn't like you see in the movies. Nothing happens when you're in a coma. Your brain just shuts off. You know when you're little and you stay the night at a friend's house? When you wake up, you can't remember where you're at and you get nervous for a second until you remember? That's exactly what it feels like to wake up from a coma, but it never really clicks. I woke up from a 2-month coma after a bad wreck where I broke my neck, hip, and couldn't walk, among other things. I could tell I was in the hospital, but I didn't know why or what happened. For some reason, I thought I was 60 and I'd been in a comatose for 30 years. In fact, I'd been in a coma for 2 months and was in my late 20s. The doctors were amazed. I'd survived a 2-month coma, which is very unlikely, so this may be the longest period of time you'll get a legit answer for. But of course, people always have stories that are like, my cousin was in a 3-year coma and said. However, it's insanely rare that people will wake up after even months. 2 weeks because of swine flu. During this time, Oprah announced she was ending the Oprah Winfrey Show. I was very upset to learn this after the fact. Mostly because the TV running in my room, and the medication they had to give me to keep me under, gave the most cinematic dreams I've ever experienced. Somehow, the news of Oprah retiring filtered into my brain as dreaming about saving the whales with her in a submerged Chicago. We had a champagne brunch. It was excellent. I was also a superhero who could fly and fought my enemies on the rims of volcanoes. And then I woke up and not only could I not fly, but my buddy Oprah had betrayed me into retirement. I was crushed. I don't know if 6 months counts as a long time in this context, but that's how long I was in a coma. The most shocking thing, naturally, was being told the date. The last date I remembered was sometime in September. I was being told it was March of the following year. I was in denial of this for several months to the point of refusing to believe it was my birthday in the spring, and insisting that it must be Halloween, the only feasible holiday I could think of for roughly around the time I'd been awake, based on my last date that I knew. So my family had to tell me the cake they brought me was to celebrate Halloween instead of my birthday, otherwise I would freak out on them. Complicating this was the fact that I lost my sight in this ordeal, so it all seemed like some weird trippy dream for me that I couldn't wake up from. I couldn't tell you when it finally sank in that the date was really 6 months beyond what I'd remembered, but it was a trip all the same. Not a coma, but an anesthesia experience. I remember waking up totally rigid down there, and tried standing up and almost fell over. The girl tried to catch me and I said, "I got this," and then I stumbled into the hallway and passed out. I wasn't in a coma, but I had a serious concussion. I woke up with no memory of anything at all. When things finally started coming back to me, a dog ran up to me and I started petting it. I looked at my dad and asked when we got this dog, because I didn't even remember getting him. Long story short, it wasn't our dog. My dad tells this story to his friends and says, "That's when I knew you were messed up." Maybe it's a me thing, but I would be very disappointed if I'd assumed the ownership of a cute doggo, and my family then informed me that it was not in fact our Poochie. My grief might even overtake that which I felt for my lost memories. I have epilepsy, and I've been in a brief coma due to dropping and knocking. I don't recall how long it was, or anything about it really, just what I'm told. I woke up really confused, and for some reason, the first thing I did was try to leave so I could, and I quote, "go home and smoke a J." The nurses explained what happened while stifling laughter. I tried to walk out even though I had all sorts of crap hooked up to me though. Didn't even notice that stuff. I pulled all-nighters when I was 15 or so, and I decided to see how long I could go while on spring break. I stayed up around 5 days, but the 5th day I crashed and I don't even know when, and I slept on the couch and woke up feeling kinda groggy, mostly hungry and thirsty. I wasn't surprised though, as all-nighters can do that to you, just one will. And according to my family, I slept for about 32 hours and got up to pee twice, and I don't remember. After the 24-hour mark, my mum almost took me to the hospital, but she knew what I did, so she left me be. You end up so confused about the time and the day of the week as well. I didn't realize how hungry I was until I ate, and then it hurt like I was starving. I drank a lot of Gatorade to rehydrate after that. Since I'm getting a lot of questions asking about hallucinations or you guys sharing your own stories, and oh my god, are some of those weird. By the end of my all-nighter bender, I was having conversations that didn't actually happen and all sorts of crap just out of sight and auditory, which was hell considering I also have tinnitus and the constant ringing along with all of it isn't fun. Around the 4th day I was getting it, and from there it got worse. It probably didn't help that my diet during this was canned beans and iced tea. I don't even want to think about how that probably hurt my insides like my liver. All the things I thought I heard or saw helped me understand a little bit of what my uncle goes through with his severe schizophrenia, like voices, shadow people, and stuff like that. I woke up on a carriage with some other guys and one of them said to me, "Hey, you're finally awake." Honestly, I don't think you'll find many, if any, real replies from the ones who've been under longer than a few weeks for this. The truth is, people who've been in a coma for a long time wake up brain damaged. The trope of waking up after years of being in a coma and being okay is just not something that happens in real life. Someone who's been in a coma for years will wake up a vegetable. I was flying a plane and crashed in 1944. I woke up in 2011 and joined the Avengers and fought aliens. So what shocked me was the aliens. I understood that reference. I woke up after a 3-day coma to my dad sitting at the edge of my bed. The first thing he said was, "Oh, thank God you're awake. I didn't know when you were going to come around." I used to be a cop, but I was shot on duty. The surgeons saved my life, but I slipped into a coma. When I woke up a few months later, my wife had dumped me on minimum care and took off to hook up with my old partner and had taken my son with her. I had to travel cross-country to even find them. When I did, there was an altercation between me and my old partner that ended when my son shot him. Thanks, Carl. Wasn't for a long time. I was overdosed on anesthesia after an ingrown toenail operation. I slept for over 24 hours. Was just gone. But as I first passed out on the way home from the operation, my parents decided to just carry me to my room and to let me sleep. Came up and checked on me as I seemed fine, they just let me be. I got put under for the operation before lunch the first day. Fell asleep in the car ride home. I was gone that full day till the next day late at night. So maybe 30 to 36 hours or so. But yeah, waking up, not remembering anything and thinking you've just been gone for like a few minutes. But it's dark when you wake up. And as you get downstairs, they tell you you've been out for pretty much 2 days. Like, you felt fine, but everything just felt wrong as well. Your body and mind are just confused. It was weird, not something that I hope to experience again. Yeah, granted, it was not a coma, only a trip to Albania. It was quite similar. I was there for 6 months in 2013, and when I returned, I was told that there'd been 3 Australian Prime Ministers while I was gone. Half my family and a few friends legitimately thought I'd passed away due to a poorly worded Facebook post. Day after the hospital discharged me, I found my Instagram and Facebook flooded with people mourning or apologizing. I was in a coma for 2 months the year the Patriots went undefeated but lost to the Giants in the Super Bowl, and that blew me away. It was also super emotional because watching football was something I did with my dad. And when we watched a game together, he broke down telling me how he thought we were never going to get to see another game together. In 2003, I was in a high-speed rollover and as a result spent a few days in a coma. When I woke, I was shocked to find myself in a hospital. I called my mum and asked her if she could bring me a cigarette. She told me that she couldn't, I'd totaled our van. And I asked if she could just walk over, we lived close to our local hospital, but she told me that I was in Denver, that they'd had to flight for life me there. It was very distressing to me, both my location and that I'd rolled our van. She told me that she'd be there as soon as my dad got back to the house. Even after talking to my folks and the doctors, it was very hard to process what had happened. To this day, I only have extremely faint memories of looking at the clocks on the dashboard and zero recollection of roughly a week's worth of time preceding it. Literally just a blank spot in my memory that's still very uncomfortable for me. Apparently, I'd actually woken up a day or two earlier than I can remember, had already seen my folks and answered questions from both the doctors and police officers. I can't remember any of that either. What is the most pathetic GoFundMe or Kickstarter that you've ever seen? There are 2 that are tied for me. Help! I committed a hit and run, was found, and also ticketed for driving without a license and insurance. I can't afford these tickets because I don't have a job and I'm only 16. The other one was, please help fund my lawyer to get my daughters back after I lost them due to neglect and my substance habit. Basically, both of these equate to, help! I messed up bad and committed a crime. Pay to help me.
I know a couple who did a GoFundMe for their wedding, and then they eloped. It's the 1-year anniversary of their eloping, and they're posting about it on Facebook like they didn't up and run away with their friends and family's money. Frickin' jerks. A guy I knew made a GoFundMe asking for $5,000 to move out to LA to attempt to become a famous artist. Kickstarter is one thing, at least those offer incentives in return. This guy was straight up just asking for money to fund his lifestyle because he has zero initiative to save money for himself and parties it all away. $40 was the extent of the donations. The page was quietly removed a few weeks later. A girl in my town did one because she wanted a vajazzle, and her mum wouldn't give her the money for one. That very briefly went viral before it was taken down. Please pay for my honeymoon. We never got a honeymoon because we couldn't afford it. Please pay for us to take a late honeymoon. Same couple, 2 fundraisers. See, my brother-in-law and his wife asked for monetary donations towards their honeymoon in lieu of wedding gifts. I find this acceptable, but it was also extended to only those invited to the wedding, so probably really not the same thing. Definitely that lady who spent literally all her money buying lottery tickets because she was confident she'd win, then started a GoFundMe to get back on her feet. It was thousands and thousands of bucks if I remember correctly. I think the fundraising site shut it down. See, these are pathetic, but at least we can laugh at these. The narrator was fairly sure that this video would be filled with people writing about the ones where people use GoFundMe to pay their medical bills, which, to be clear, isn't pathetic for them to do, as crippling medical debt can happen to anyone in the States at any time. What's pathetic is the system that lets it happen. Oh my god, the following post comes to mind. I recently lost someone very dear to me, and before I did, they had said that when they would, they could get me a new Nintendo 3DS, or at least help me to get one if I ended up with some money of my own. So now I would like your guys' help since she can no longer do, so I have found one that I would love to get, but it's a little pricey, so in her memory, please help me get this so I can honor her and what she wanted to do, thank you. By the way, there were no full stops in any of that.
What the heck? It seems like they're more upset that their friend didn't get a chance to buy them the 3DS than they are that their friend actually died.
Friend of mine had a parent lose their job and consequently requested money for recreational purposes because she wanted to enjoy the college experience. Normally, I would have chipped in, but her dad was a long-time executive at a big insurance company and she drove a new BMW as a high schooler. Not to mention she was going to college on a scholarship. I think she still pulled like $200. This is more in the analog world, but it's in the same kind of vein. My wife's cousin had a baby shower. The whole family bought her a boatload of stuff, walkers, car seat, stroller, all the standard expensive baby stuff. Well, after her baby was done with all of it, she sold it, probably for green herb money. Then she got preggers with her second child at age 19. She decided to hold a second baby shower. She was annoyed the entire family didn't just buy her all the expensive crap they'd already bought her over again. My sister posting one asking for money because she couldn't pay her rent because she can't hold a job down. She doesn't like to take responsibility for her actions and just expects everyone else to take care of her.
Help me with my gaming PC build.
They started a GoFundMe so they could quit work and stay home to tweet about professional wrestling. We popped out a bunch of kids and now we need a van.
Another favorite of mine is, I totaled my car, help me buy a newer, more luxurious one. Hey, I'm pretty, help me buy a Mac cause I want one.
A girl from my town started one in hopes of quitting her job and becoming a stay-at-home mum. I just saw 2 in the last week and one has made money and one hasn't yet. The first is this very attractive girl, her looks probably matter to the story, who posted a GoFundMe to get an extra $100 to help with her vacation. Her story was that she was a full-time nurse who struggles with a health condition and needs a break. She has enough for the trip that she's been saving for months for, but the extra $100 will help her cover some extra things. I checked it yesterday and she has almost $1,000. Someone donated $300 to her. The other is some kid who definitely smokes a lot of green herb, who wants $1,000 to buy music equipment for his crappy rap career. It was only posted this morning, but when I clicked, he had $20 donated to himself. He donated his own money towards it. Some woman whose standard coffee maker had broken and wanted money to buy a top-of-the-line Keurig.
A guy who has money for mods on his automatic FRS and flaunts wads of cash on his Facebook, asking for a handout when his car got vandalized. I knew a girl who started a GoFundMe for a down payment on a house. Her justification was that she throws huge parties and everyone would come and party there. This girl I went to high school with's boyfriend was killed in a car accident a year or so ago. She started a GoFundMe for herself to pay rent and other expenses for her and their baby, by which I mean dog. They weren't married and she wasn't expected to pay any of the funeral costs. She was just trying to get free money because something bad happened.
Give us several $1,000s for our wedding.
When confronted, the girl said that she was being humble enough to ask for help when she needed it. Too bad she couldn't be humble enough to just get married at the courthouse. Definitely Zana Joshi's You Care fundraiser. If you somehow don't know who she is, she's the lady who overreacted to a guy saying that his name was Humongous. She tried to make money because she was, quote, harassed by Humongous and wants to stop the patriarchy. What she got instead was a crap ton of $1 donations telling her how much of a sensitive piece of crap she was. A girl I knew a few years ago decided to quit her job and travel the world for a year. Racked up something like $30,000 in credit card debt and then started a GoFundMe to support her new freeing lifestyle. Wrote a whole diatribe about how important it is she not work and continue to live and travel doing nothing. I think it made like $200. It was so cringy to read. So to be clear, I think there is a line to be drawn in the sand with the whole boomer diatribe of young people expect to be paid for nothing, when it's directed towards these sort of people who literally want something for nothing while they travel in luxury and tear up the atmosphere while being waited on hand and foot. It may have some value to the argument. Just stop directing it at people who take student loans or who've been laid off and need some unemployment benefits while they get back on their feet. Deal? A guy I went on one date with, the date happened around 2006, had the dumbest Kickstarter. Backstory, he's friends with a bunch of my friends. We were on a date with the sole reason being that we were both gay and our friends just knew we would like each other. I'm a non-detectable, straight-acting gay and he wasn't. Not to say he was over-the-top flamboyant, but you could tell. Not a bad thing, I've dated flamboyant dudes and they're fun. The date? During the first part of dinner, he wouldn't stop going on about how rich he was, how he owned a house, how much he liked me, and that he couldn't wait to get me home even though we'd never met before. He reached across the table and unbuttoned a button on my shirt. I wear them with the top 3 undone as is, and he told me he liked a hairy man. I'm hairy, by the way, and said he was ready for us to move in. Then he started asking me what positions I was into in the bedroom. Then he started loudly talking about his Johnson. It's rigid under the table. I hushed him only for him to show me it via photo on an old 2004 camera phone and asked what I would do with it. I gave him a, "Is this really the place for this discussion?" And he rebutted it with, "No, really, what would you do with it?" Our waiter, another gentleman, could tell I wasn't feeling it with this guy, thank God, and brought 2 separate checks. The cherry on top of the evening was when it came time for him to pay. He was upset that he had to pay for himself. I thanked him for the evening and got ready to head out. Then I remembered. He fricking drove us. Outside, he tried to start his car, but it wouldn't, so he threw rocks at it. I had to call my sister so she could jump his car. She came and asked if we needed a ride. He gave her a, "Nah, we got it from here," so she left, even though I was giving her the, "Don't you dare leave." From there, he was asking if I wanted to go home or if I'd rather come back to his place. I said, "Home please, I'm kind of tired." He took the long way, then pulled off the side of the road and confronted me about how weird I was at dinner. I told him it was strange how he went from being a pretty nice guy to basically making me feel more uncomfortable than I've ever felt in my life in a restaurant full of people. I was looking out my window while talking to him and I had no idea how I didn't hear this, but he had unzipped his fly. When I turned back to him, the fricking Washington Monument was just standing straight up.
What about just 1 or 2 licks and we can keep driving?
I was fricking done. I told him off. He drove me the rest of the way home, with it still out, by the way, one hand on it and the other on the steering wheel, making a pouty face when I would look over. We got to my street, I asked him to delete my number. In short, worst date ever, one of the most uncomfortable nights of my life, and all by a guy claiming to come from money and talking about his posh lifestyle and huge apartment. Also, he pulled it out and got pouty because I wasn't overcome with lust at the sight of it. But anyway, here's his Kickstarter. About 3 years ago, my sister linked me to a Kickstarter.
Isn't this that guy you hated after meeting one time?
His Kickstarter was basically,
help me pay my rent, pay off my car, I'm saving to get married to my girlfriend of 10 years,
or some crap like that. The best part was also that he stated he had cancer on his twig and berries and he couldn't afford treatment. What happened to the house you owned at 25? What happened to the car that you owned? Which was still on his Facebook photos, by the way. You have a girlfriend? Johnson cancer? What? You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. There was a day-old account over on the Tuber Reddit that asked everyone on the sub to review his post on Kickstarter. Always happy to help another tuba player, I checked it out. Maybe he was starting some kind of organization for tubists. Maybe he was helping kids, who knew? It was literally a guy who played in high school asking people to buy him a tuba, a new $9,000 tuba at that. The members of the sub were not very impressed, and the original poster quickly deleted the thread and the Kickstarter afterwards.
I want something I can't afford. Will you get it for me?
There was a Kickstarter for an indie comic series I found through Reddit delusional artists called Full Stop, The Fall of All. It was like looking at a 14-year-old DeviantArt member trapped in a 30-year-old man's body who couldn't see how bizarre his setup was, how crude his drawings and writing were, and just how unmarketable his entire venture was. If you've spent nearly 2 decades trying to get the same darn story off the ground, then, like what an aviation engineer said to the inventor of the brick-based airship, this crap won't fly. So the setup was 2 gods make a bunch of powerful weapons and leave them lying around for some reason. They then build a creature to guard them, but give him a black hole for a heart for some reason again. This is bad and will destroy the universe for some reason. They send him down to live as a bald eagle. This is a furry comic, by the way. But his black hole will drive him insane and he only has a year to live. Suddenly, mysterious good guys want to kill him to save the universe, and really stupid bad guys want to kill him so they can destroy the universe. He somehow has a magic katana that has a samurai ghost inside, and the ghost speaks Shakespearean English. There's now another Kickstarter for this crap. They want to make a video game. They're promising it will lift features from Undertale. Somehow, this got funded. Well, regardless of how harsh this author's words about the creator's talent is, pretty harsh in the narrator's book, the narrator decided to check up both on the novel and the game. The novel never achieved funding, which the artist is hardly to blame for, but the game was under development for 3 years, released a demo of sorts, and then after one final update saying the pandemic was going to slow down production, they disappeared completely. Which honestly is fairly typical for a Kickstarter project. Oh well. When I was a film major, one of my film professors started a Kickstarter campaign for a zombie film app called Zombie Map. I'm pretty sure most of the contributions were from film students who feel committed to support him because it was a crappy idea for a lot of money. The idea of the app is that filmmakers can make film or zombie movies or short films and upload it on the app. The app acts like a GPS. If you click on an area with an outbreak, then you get to see movies that are set in that area. It never achieved its goal, but honestly, it was pretty close. This couple made one to have people pay them to meet. It was a long-distance relationship. Even worse was that they were known for breaking up frequently and had already made 2 GoFundMe posts about the same thing. I think the worst of all was that they actually made a decent amount of money each time.
Me and my girlfriend are moving to Chicago. Everyone give us money for rent.
No. An in-law of mine is dying of COPD. She never stopped smoking, even though her initial diagnosis was 10 years ago. So far, $1,300 has been donated so her husband can quit work to take care of her. A job her daughter is already doing. Thinking about the whole situation just upsets me. I have a friend who's kinda cute, but she's got nothing going on chest-wise. She started a GoFundMe for a chest job, and people donate because she's cute. Oh, I don't think it's up anymore, but my best friend went to jail and met this trick named Tricky Nikki. Tricky Nikki is a serious pillhead, and after she got out of jail, Tricky Nikki got into a huge fight outside of a club over a guy or something. Tricky Nikki set up a GoFundMe with a sub-story of "Boo-hoo, I was mugged on my way to Bible study," cause she is on paper still, so that was her official story. Well, she made $50, then someone ratted on her all over Facebook, and then the Snapchat video was leaked. They sent to her local police department and now Tricky Nikki is in prison for 3 more years. Facebook drama is truly the best thing to watch from a distance. I volunteered as a teacher in Fiji. Another chick who was going in the same group as I was started a GoFundMe for herself, asking people to pay for her expenses. It was bad enough that she volunteered, yet wanted others to pay for her to do it, and then she shared it in the volunteer group with us, saying, "Please help out," smiley face. The Potato Salad Kickstarter, which raised $55,000 whilst promising people a bite. I was thinking of this one. Total props to the guy because he took his internet fame and did fun stuff afterwards. Semi-famous or even famous musicians setting up GoFundMe pages to fund the production of a new album.
Pay for me to make this album. If it flops, I won't be out any money, and if it gets popular, I'll rake in the cash.
I can kind of understand this with lower to mid-level artists, sort of buy the album before it's made kind of thing. One of my favorite bands has done this a couple of times and they'll never get big record or company money or have hits, so having the fans directly support them is kind of cool. Usually, a higher contribution might get you the album and a t-shirt or signed merch, so that's a nice option. Some bands will never sell enough to rake in the cash, but still want to produce music. Someone like Beyoncé or Taylor Swift has no business doing this, though. This one guy wanted to take his girlfriend to EDC for their 1-year anniversary. He was asking around $700 for tickets alone. People roasted him and told him to get a job. He hadn't even considered hotel, airfare, or food, among other things. Shenmue 3. While the project itself probably isn't the kind of thing you think of when someone says pathetic, and it's certainly not, but the fact that this is a Kickstarter backed and publicized by Sony. Frickin' Sony put center stage during their E3 presentation with their own exclusive time slot. What the frick? I'm sure Sony were very unsure about the project when they decided to do that. The idea of Sony, one of the largest publishers in the world, if not the largest, asking fans to fund development of a critically acclaimed classic series, it's just obscene. And the most pathetic part is that it was fully backed almost instantly. Really, I'm just waiting for Activision to kickstart a Call of Duty title. That's the only thing left that could really outdo this. I had the greatest idea for a Kickstarter, then I realized it would have fit this category that we're talking about in the video. 1. Project is to develop a time machine. 2. Hire someone to go back in time, they must bring their own weapons. 3. They go back in time to just before Jesus' birth. 4. They record and document what the frick actually happened with him. 5. They hide the tapes in a secret location and never reveal their identities or any of what they've done so as to not upset the timeline. 6. In 2020, we go to the location and recover the tapes. 7. Everyone who contributed gets a copy of the tape. The problem is finding some kind of digital media which would keep the recording that long, which I don't think exists. Yes, sure. The final problem is the only problem with this entire Kickstarter idea. The rest is completely reasonable and doable. I kind of wish that I had seen something like this in the days when I actually donated to Kickstarters. It's pretty great. Any Kickstarter asking for people to pay for their backpacking trip to Thailand or something to help them discover themselves. Someone from my high school started one to pay for college tuition. In the end, she had to suck it up and go into debt like the rest of us. Some guy I didn't know very well set up a Kickstarter in my name to buy me a new car because mine broke down every few weeks. I appreciated it, but it also made me kinda want to die. Some completely random guy posted about wanting to quit his job and become a full-time YouTube Let's Player. He wanted $5,000 to get started. He got a whopping $5, and you gotta think it was a friend who felt bad for him, or even just the guy donating to himself from another account. My old high school boyfriend started a GoFundMe for his second divorce. I can't find the link, but I remember seeing a GoFundMe on my Twitter timeline about this white girl who raised a lot of money because her parents didn't approve of her dating a black dude and going to prom together. Not really pathetic, but they raised a crap ton just for prom tickets. My cousin started a GoFundMe to buy dresses for a pageant. She then complained on Facebook the day after creating it that her friends and family liked her post with the GoFundMe link, but didn't donate. Meanwhile, she's 24, hasn't held down a job for longer than 3 months, and has dropped out of 3 colleges. Recently helped her with her resume, but she told me she couldn't apply to jobs because she couldn't afford a laptop. Girl I know who updated her Facebook all the time, complaining about welfare and how she works hard for her money and supports her kids, unlike all the people mooching off the system. She started a Kickstarter to get a new apartment because there wasn't enough space for her kids and they'd run into some issues that were keeping them stuck in a cycle of not having enough money. First 5 or so comments were all saying variations of, "Gee, if only there was some kind of system to help people out of these situations so people's lives don't get ruined by cycles of poverty." It came across as so stupid because she was so vocal for years, just because she had never run into hard times as a stay-at-home mum. What happened to people who got caught getting busy? At work. Worked at Wendy's when I was a teenager. Just me at the register, the manager, and another girl in her early 20s at the drive-thru. There was another guy in his 20s who was on the grill and an older woman at the sandwich station, who I chatted with often. It was almost closing time. The manager is in the office doing whatever it is they do. The woman at sandwiches starts doing dishes, and the other two are outside taking a quick smoke break. So I start cleaning up the dining area and take the trash out to the dumpster. The dumpsters are enclosed around a fenced gate to keep pests and animals out. As I approached the dumpster, I heard someone else whisper, "Shh, shh," followed by a quiet, "What?" I am now aware these two people are not actually smoking and probably doing something my 16-year-old eyes don't want to see, especially since it's my co-workers. So I stand there for a moment, figuring out what to do as I'm tired and ready to go home. Then, without a second thought, I heave the trash bag over the gate and yell out, "Throw the trash in the dumpster for me when you're done." I walk back inside to finish cleaning up. The two lovebirds walk in about 5 minutes later and do whatever they can to avoid eye contact with me. As I'm heading to my truck, I check the dumpsters to see if they threw the bag in the bin. To my surprise, they actually did. This was years ago. I was in the US Army working as a supply specialist, so I had keys to everything. Female coworker and I would do the deed everywhere. Storage rooms, offices, empty barracks rooms. It went on for months. One day, our platoon sergeant pulled us aside and told us he knew what's been going on. Said that he saw us in one of our large warehouse areas. He said as long as it never happened again, he wouldn't make a big deal out of it. He kept his word. Good dude. My friend caught the maintenance man and his wife doing the deed in the break room. He never said anything. At my old job in a sheet metal factory, we caught 2 elderly employees doing the deed in the back of his Suburban. We'd long suspected it, because they went from being extremely close to kind of just trying to not be seen talking too much. Also, because it was a job that had unlimited overtime, they'd both show up at the same time and leave at the same time, even though we didn't have set hours. It was wild because both his son and her sons worked for the same company. His wife would show up and bring food for the whole staff in our department too, and you could see the mistress's guilt whenever his wife was there because she'd always leave. After we caught them, we kept our mouths shut about it, but they both started being really nice to us. The woman would bring us all lunch every day. It honestly saved us so much money. We'd eat out almost every day prior to that. And I'm not just talking ham and cheese sandwiches that she bought. She was Mexican and would make us full meals, tacos with beans and rice, chilaquiles, nopales, you name it. She had this little griddle in the break room and she'd make them fresh. It's probably the only thing I miss about that job. Silver lining to a very awkward and complicated situation. You know what? I would have accepted those free meals as a bribe too. Knocking on a coworker's partner for their infidelity is already a thing I'm probably not going to do for the sake of keeping my own life uncomplicated, which I know is selfish. I may as well accept some delicious Mexican food to relieve my guilt. I found out my long-term girlfriend was banging a maintenance guy at the nuclear power plant she worked at, because he left a message saying he couldn't see her that night because a transformer had, quote, blowed up. I remember incredulously asking her, "You're cheating on me with a guy that says blowed up?" There was a girl who'd done the deed with some employees for pay. When caught, they transferred her to another building and took some minor disciplinary action against all involved. Then, she did it again at the new building, so they transferred her back. At this point, a couple of years had passed, so there were no old clients in her area. Then she did it again. Third time was the final straw to get her fired.
This woman was taking home 2 days' paycheck for 1 day worth of work. Wow.
I worked with a guy at my previous job who was a night security guard for the main facility. Very smart guy, but had tons of self-destructive behavior when he was doing well.
He was caught on camera entering an office with a night janitor, and she confessed that they'd been doing the deed at work. When confronted, he admitted to doing the deed with her, and they said he'd be terminated. He agreed, but first asked them to show him where it explicitly said in the company policy that doing the deed on company grounds was prohibited. He'd already reviewed the company policy and knew he had a claim of potential wrongful termination, and they did as well. Soon after, we had an updated corporate policy release with some clarification on what was considered appropriate work behavior. The guy actually stayed with the company for years and went on to work in manufacturing, where he was terminated for more self-destructive behavior. People ask for more stories, so I'll share a few of the ones I recall and aren't too personal to him. Once he went just beyond the city limits, it was a large city, to a decent-sized river and creek. He was shooting a sawed-off shotgun into the water when the cops came after numerous complaints. He had all the licenses required to duck hunt and could legally hunt there, but the officers had to talk him into moving to a safer location, because he wasn't hunting after all. The other story I recall was him driving a tiny front loader at work that a third-party contractor had bought in for the day. He ended up messing something up and then using the safety policy against the company as a way to protect himself. I can't recall the exact reasoning behind this one, but we all thought it was the end for him, but he managed to work himself out of it. Okay, what's today's topic? Reads question. I didn't know I couldn't do that. Back in 2010, my high school basketball coach got caught doing the deed with a very pregnant teacher in the hospitality room of the school. And I mean very pregnant. And both of them were married. Very sad. I work in a government office. Our boss got caught doing the deed with his private secretary. Boss stepped down and the secretary was suspended for 6 months. My boss was caught in affairs with 5 different women at the hotel I worked at. He was fired with a long investigation. It sure explained why the dude was always late leaving. He had to catch up from how much banging he did. I was caught by my boss's boss going at it with my boss. He threw his binder down on the ground to get our attention. Then he left and we broke apart, then just finished the shift. I was so sure we were both going to get fired. I was a nervous wreck the whole day. In the end, he decided not to tell anyone and not to fire us. He just asked me if it was consensual, which it was, and lectured me on how inappropriate that was. Obviously, I agree. He also said he wished us a happy relationship. Scariest and most awkward day at work of my life. Never again. I see the supervisor sometimes, and I know it's obviously something we'll both never forget. You know, I have respect for someone who makes sure a lower employee, or anyone, isn't being taken advantage of. Good for him. Got caught by my brother plowing a coworker in the back of our family-owned restaurant. He played it cool for a few years until we were talking about it at lunch and I casually mentioned how I know he caught us. That was the day I found out he was doing the same thing with the same girl. Update, to answer the number one question I'm getting, my god guys, it wasn't my sister, it was my brother's sister. I plant trees for a living and hire over 30 20-something-year-olds and send them into remote areas for days at a time. Often I set up trail cameras to track progress and get cool time-lapse shots, and also wildlife pics. On more than a few occasions, I've seen photos of staff walking off together and one glorious shot of one of these people going south of the border on the other one. I delete the photos and I don't make a big deal of it. If it doesn't impact their tree numbers, I just consider them on a break. Most of the time they're paid per tree planted, so it's up to them how much time they want to plant versus how much time they want to do the deed. In my case, nothing happened. They said sorry and closed the walk-in fridge door. Restaurants are a weird and wacky world. Yes, pizza restaurant of more than 10 years here, can confirm. Lots of young, stressed-out, overworked people who don't have time to develop social relationships outside of the kitchen they're chained to for 45 hours a week. Add in the fact that many restaurants have lax enforcement of literally every rule they're supposed to have, and that so many restaurants' employees are college kids or early 20s college dropouts that are still attractive and cool, and that so many restaurants serve alcohol to their staff at a discount frequently on the clock, and you've got a perfect storm. A perfect, sweaty, dramatic, foolish, horny storm. Also, substances. Very true of hospitality. Also, this was a decade ago, but I remember seeing that there was an additional factor in some article or another. If employees don't like their boss, then the number of workplace flings flies through the roof.
I guess people console one another against a hated foe, and most people working in restaurants hate their bosses. So yeah, no wonder they're always getting busy behind the bins. I used to work at the county jail, and we hired a new officer that worked in the cage. The cage control room is semi-private and has control of unlocking doors, so no one can walk in without the cage operator pushing a button. She was in an open marriage and put it out for just about anyone. She got caught when 8 officers got the clap. A few spouses, who got the clap from their cheating husbands, complained to the sheriff and she was fired. Demotions, suspensions, and firings of other male officers followed after an internal investigation.
I mean, if you know she puts out for everyone, why in the name of sweet Satan's gonads would you not wear protection every darned time?
When 8 people or more get the clap, it's called a round of applause. Am I right? Not me, but my ex-boss snorted white snow in our bathroom before going south of the border on a customer in our parking lot. Came back in and boasted to us that she got free green herb from this guy. A week later, fired. She's still engaged to her fiancé, who is not the customer, by the way. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I used to work at a high-end restaurant for a few years, so I got a few stories. For instance, one time after closing up shop, we were getting ready to go home, when I heard a noise in one of the broom closets. I found 2 customers banging away in it after we'd closed down. Another time, I went into our walk-in freezer after we'd mostly closed to do a quick inventory, only to find one of the waitresses getting frickin' plowed by one of the other chefs. I laughed and said, "Don't let me interrupt, I'm just counting inventory." Another time, one of our corporate chefs got fired for thrashing his hog in the manager's office. So that was pretty neat. But the best one by far has to be the time we were closing up shop and this waitress and cook kinda had a little thing going on and the whole kitchen staff knew about it. So one day we saw them walk into our outdoor cooler and shut the door behind them. Someone mentioned it to me and naturally I told everyone who was still there. We all waited outside the door and listened to see if we could hear the sounds of them getting busy. And we did. So when they finished, they walked out only to be greeted by the entire closing staff shouting, "Frickin' finally!" Oh, they were so embarrassed. It was great. I never have, but I can tell you that entire company-wide design decisions have been made for Amazon fulfillment centers to help curb such actions. For example, all janitor closets are required to have half-glass doors. My math teacher got caught doing the deed with my English teacher on the school printer in the conference room. So he got the name Printer Effer. And yeah, he's German, the German word for printer is Drucker, so the name Drucker Effer sounds a lot better in my native language. Not me, but 2 co-workers at a small family restaurant. They got caught doing the deed in the bathroom when the owner literally opened the door on them because they didn't lock it. The girl was bent over the sink and they were watching themselves in the mirror. He slammed the door shut and when they came out a few minutes later, panicky and shamefaced, he yelled at them, "If you're gonna do that, you clock out first," while the rest of us laughed our butts off. Worked retail in college. We were in the stockroom, clothes mostly still on, when the shift manager came in. I had her up against some fitted shirts. Me and her were written up and sent home. They interviewed us separately the next day and we lied about not having a relationship so they wouldn't transfer one of us. Looking back, I'm actually pretty surprised we weren't fired. Co-worker and manager got caught. He got transferred and she started hitting on me, and everyone else. It was awkward, but they were both adults. Not necessarily on duty, but I was at work. I used to work on cruise ships, and crew occasionally got cabin inspections. My girlfriend/co-worker and I were doing the deed in the morning when we heard a knock and the phrase, "cabin inspection," in an authoritative British accent, which we knew was the ship's captain. I managed to grab all of my clothes and run to the restroom. My girlfriend straightened out the room and managed to stall the captain and prevent him from checking the bathroom. She told me that I forgot the used rubbers on the floor and she managed to step on them to hide them with her bare feet. I owed her big time for that one. I used to work in fast food, and a manager got caught doing the deed with an employee. They were going to just transfer him, but they realized that the employee was 17 and the manager was 24, so he was fired. The employee quit because they thought it would keep the manager from being fired. I quit a few weeks later for unrelated reasons. I'm getting a lot of replies asking if we worked at the same place. It is scary how many places this seems to have happened at, and I work at Taco Bell. I worked at Whole Foods. A man and a wife working together, and the wife was 6 months pregnant. One day the wife goes out to their shared car during a lunch break, and lo and behold, inside the car, her husband is just banging away with another Whole Foods employee, someone much younger. I've never seen the entire store come together like a family as they did in that day to support the pregnant wife. The husband and wife did stay together against everyone's advice, and the young lady he cheated with quit work. The ones who I caught at work started dating immediately after they were caught, and now they're moving in together. The boss gave no Fs about it either. I was a whitewater raft guide 10 years ago. We would party at the area where we stacked our rafts at night at our boathouse, and we slept in tents nearby. One thing led to another, and my girlfriend at the time and I got on top of a stack of rafts under the stars quite drunk. The boathouse manager lived in a small apartment with an upstairs window directly adjacent to this stack of rafts. We would be introduced to our tours by him each day with a fun little anecdote like, "This is James, best river guide west of the Mississippi." So the next day after we did this, after saying nothing to us, he was introducing us to a new crowd and went, "Okay, now your guide is going to be Chelsea the Screamer," with a pointed look at us. She looked like she saw a ghost and then laughed it off. There were no further repercussions beyond the call-out and a bit of laughs. It was a laid-back environment, though. Yeah, that's the kind of thing I'm not sure you could ever get away with in a modern office environment, but it seems like par for the course for an outdoorsy job where the staff happen to get busy well away from the gaze of any HR-type folks. Worked at a bank branch a long time ago, and one of the financial advisors was pregnant with twins, and everyone was super happy for her. Apparently she'd been trying for several years with her husband, and it finally worked. Fast forward to her last day at work before her maternity leave, we decided to throw her a small goodbye party at the branch employees' room after closing hours. The husband was present as well. 15 minutes passed and suddenly the husband decided it was time for a toast and that apparently he made a lovely video for his wife to show her how grateful he was on a USB stick and insisted on showing us the video. So the manager bought him his laptop so we could watch it. The video was a hidden camera, I guess, in their bathroom of the advisor doing the deed with another guy with sound and everything. We were all so shocked, the video played for a good minute until the manager closed his laptop and basically sent everyone home. The advisor was crying her life out, the husband had this evil smile on his face and took his USB stick out of the laptop and said, "See you in court," and left. I was an engineer at a company. A couple were fired for doing the deed in his car in the parking lot. Our company was one of the biggest CCTV manufacturers in the world. I designed camera control systems. Our parking lot was also used to test products, and had one of the highest camera per square foot ratio of any parking lot anywhere. Our cameras had amazing zoom capabilities. This just never occurred to these two brainiacs. Management insisted that we delete all footage. And to clarify, these weren't engineers, they were support. Maybe they had an associate degree, but I doubt it. The parking lot is company property. Company handbooks and HR training both say not on company property. Also strongly implied is not with the company name. At a college job in an office, the janitor walked in on me and another intern furiously banging it out with zero remorse in an empty conference room. The only repercussion is that now I get to marry her in a month. Kinda weird that the janitor forced you to marry her. Sort of work, but more like university. We worked as lab assistants, teacher's assistants kind of roles, and after we finished grading assignments in the classroom section of the lab every Wednesday night, her and I would do the deed on one of the desks. There were 10 desks and 10 weeks left in the semester. So we thought we would take advantage of the privacy, and it would give us an excuse to grade quizzes and tests and work sets as fast as possible and do the deed on a different desk every week. The last week we were just screwing away on the last desk. The professor shows up with food thanking us for being so much more dedicated than all her other assistants in all her years teaching. She sees us, with the chick sitting on the desk with her legs spread wide and me facing her, thrusting, standing up. The professor says, "Well, this explains a lot. Don't get pregnant." She put the food down and left, locking the door on the way out. We finished, ate the food, and did the deed again. Best professor ever? Not even a question. My wife is a teacher. I visited her classroom after hours and we banged in the actual broom closet like something off a crappy sitcom. Of course, someone walked in and said, "Whoops," and left, and I almost lost my mind and my focus. But my wife was like, "Relax, half the staff are doing this, and I've caught a few in here myself before." It was difficult to finish. I got caught going at it in the toilets at a work party with my coworker. Luckily, whoever it was saved us the embarrassment and just knocked on the door loudly. We straightened up and left, carried on drinking. The toilet was tucked away in this corner so the party couldn't see us leaving and no one was outside when we left. Nothing ever came of it, thankfully. Very funny though, 10 out of 10 would do again. We hired a new guy, and as he was relocating across country, he asked for a job for his wife and we accommodated that. They ran the customer-facing aspect of our shop, which included a storefront that was only open a few hours a week. Because there was a cash box in that room, it was very secure. The owner's son had a reputation of raiding it whenever he needed a smack fix, so new doors and new locks, two-way mirrors, among other things. Routinely, we would call into the room to get things from them, and the phone would go unanswered. They assured us they were up to nothing, but we heard noises a few times, so I played a hunch. I was IT, and one day coming out of the server room, I passed them in the hall, and she asked what I was doing in there. And I fabricated a security system that no one bothered checking. I explained that I was in charge of tapes and updates, and that due to robbery and theft we had a camera in every room, including their office. I hadn't looked at it in months and was restoring the system to look at some stuff from the past 2 weeks. Fast forward about 20 minutes and they were tearing the room apart looking for a camera. You can hear her sobbing through the door, shocked at what I have on tape. They got a warning, I pointed into a vent as a heads up for the camera, and warned it got the whole room. We eventually fired both of them. I worked in loss prevention. Catching other employees became a pretty normal event. Here's the thing, most retailers put twice as many cameras in employee areas as they do in customer areas. If it was between employees, they would get a verbal warning, sometimes a written, and managers and employees would cause one to get transferred, usually the manager. Employees and a non-employee in an employee-only area was either a written or a final warning given. I can't think of anything crazy, except for when I first caught someone, the other loss prevention people were just meh, and after a while it became a normal thing. What is the most embarrassing thing you had to tell your parents? When I was 7 or 8, my grandma bought me this pair of jean shorts that were way too small, but she insisted I wear them anyway. Throughout the course of the day, the rubbing of the shorts caused a few cuts and something like rug burn all over my downstairs bits. When I went to pee, of course, it burned like crazy. I had to go to my mum and explain what had happened. It was awful. I once got a bunch of jelly beans for Valentine's Day from my ex-girlfriend. I hate jelly beans. Absolutely think they're the worst tasting things in the world. But I acted like I was grateful and took them home. 4 weeks later, it's 8 p.m. on a Friday and my car broke down. No one could really make it out of my house, so I was sitting in my room bored. So I started tossing jelly beans up and trying to catch them in my ear. Well, after an hour, I got one to land in my ear, like really in my ear. I went to retrieve it and I pushed it in further. So for 30 minutes I tried getting it out, and it kept getting wedged deeper and deeper. So finally I walked upstairs, looked at my mum on the couch and said, "I have a jelly bean stuck in my ear." She blinked and stared for a minute, and then asked, "How old are you?" 16. "I'm going to use this key to try and get that jelly bean out of your ear. If that doesn't work, I'm using it to drive you to the pediatrician since you're a goddamn 4-year-old. She was able to get the jelly bean out after a while. I started a stamp collection when I was 13. I really liked stamps, but nobody mailed me anything and my parents never got any good ones. So I started checking my paper route customers' mailboxes and was able to start a really good collection that way. I hid my collection in the basement because I thought my parents were searching my room. One day, my dad found hundreds of letters addressed to different people in the neighborhood where I hid them behind the Christmas stuff, and he freaked and started yelling at my mum. He said he knew what she was up to and wanted a divorce. I was scared and embarrassed, but didn't want my parents to split up, so I confessed to the collection. They made me walk my route and return all the letters while my dad videotaped me. They did split up that year anyway, so I shouldn't have said anything. My dad sent me the videotape for my 30th birthday present with a card that just said, "Good times." Oh my god, you absolute thicko. I think I was a lot younger than 13 before I was finally able to logic out why you shouldn't steal other people's mail. Still, I hope your father allowed you to keep the stamps on the mail you stole. I doubt the recipients were going to keep them anyway. He has a pretty good sense of humor, too. I have to tell mine that I'm having surgery. Circumcision, age 26, because I tore it while doing it in the butt with a woman twice my age. The first time I splooged when I was about 10 or 11 years old. I think I was just rubbing myself on the side of the bed or something, and suddenly I had no idea what was coming out of me. I hadn't learned about this, and just this white stuff dripping out of my gentleman made me freak the frick out. I had no idea if it was natural or something terribly wrong had just happened, and my mum was sleeping, so I woke her up to tell her that some weird white stuff just came out of my wee-wee. Obviously, she was a bit shocked and was trying to hide her laughter. I was a bit confused, and she kind of briefly explained what I did and said it was fine and not to worry. I don't think I thought about it too much at the time, but when I was a little older, I realized how I woke my mum up to tell her how I splooged for the first time, and my embarrassment burned like a red-hot poker. When I was 17, I tried to wake my mum up after she'd worked until about 3 a.m. She didn't want to wake up, of course, and then I told her it was because I needed to go to the Planned Parenthood to get the morning after pill, about 17 years ago. And that got her up in a flash. Didn't even ask questions or complain to me. I guess she wasn't ready to be a grandma. I was younger and I didn't really know how to fix the problem, but my number 2 was too big to flush down the toilet, so I had to ask for help.
Oh, come on, just pick it up and break it in half like a man.
I was 9 or so and I did number 2 and blood came out, but instead of my mother, my father came. He freaked out thinking that I was having my period too early and ran to call my mom.
I had to tell mine that I didn't know what a virgin was. In middle school, I didn't really know a lot about doing the deed, but I sure as crap knew how to tickle my pickle. Anyway, some conversations started at lunch, and if I recall correctly, some kid made fun of a girl because she wasn't a virgin anymore. Somehow I got pulled into it, and I said I wasn't either. More questions, with me backpedaling and finally admitting I didn't know what a virgin was. Cue my classmates making fun of me all day. In science class, I wrote a self-deletion note and folded it up. I put Mom on it and put it in my backpack. I got home, went off to karate, and forgot about everything. Mom picks me up and she has the note on her dashboard. Busted. Long story short, we had the talk, and then I had to go with my stepdad to the library and get an educational booklet on doing the deed. The one thing I remember from one of the books was that there were comments every few pages from a cat. One page about girls' periods and tampons had the cat wearing a sombrero with tampons hanging off the hat. The other page shows the cat all proud and him saying he just caught a mouse. Then a look of fear and he says, "Help, I've swallowed a tampon." It was a very strange day. I was an early 20s male and I still had never been in a relationship, nor have I ever had any real discussion come up with my family about my romantic life, in part because I was too embarrassed by it. But that summer, a couple of my friends had recently come out as gay, and I mentioned it to my parents while I was visiting home. Later that night, my mum somehow started on a "we'll love you regardless" sermon. While in a way comforting, it was also embarrassing because there I was, a full-grown 23-year-old man, having his mother openly acknowledge his innocence and effectively tell me she thought I hadn't brought anyone home because I was gay. On top of that, my dad is perhaps a bit more uneasy with homosexuality. He wouldn't kick one of his kids out or disown them for being gay, but I imagine he'd struggle to hide some disappointment. He was there for this conversation and he was visibly tense during it. After he went to bed, I turned off the TV and had a 10-minute conversation with my mum in which I had to explain to her that I was not in fact gay, but simply socially inept. It took 10 minutes because she spent the entire time continuing her "we'd love you regardless" stance. I said, "Mum, I'm straight and you're kind of freaking Dad out." And my mum said, "But if you weren't straight, we'd still love you." That's great, but it's irrelevant because I'm straight.
But if it wasn't irrelevant, it'd still be okay.
2 years later, I was finally in a relationship with a girl. In short, I had to come out to my mother as being straight. Well, my mum found my personal toy collection, so there's that. I had to tell my septuagenarian grandparents that I may have given them crabs. My grandmother just decided to get new linens and toilet seats that day, and my grandfather just shrugged it off and said,
I guess I'd better shave it back like I did in Korea. When I got my period for the first time, I sent my mum an email. Mom, Dad, you're going to want to sit down for this. I'm adopted. I'm bulimic and I can't stop and I need help. I'm sure that isn't what my mum wanted to hear her 24-year-old son tell her. Mom, why is there a schlong on my bathroom floor? Apparently, the cat dug a toy out of my parents' hiding place in their bathroom and left it for me to find in my bathroom. The worst part was my mum was saying, "Oh dear God, I hope it's not the two-headed one." So I don't really know who it was more awkward for. I had to admit to my parents that I'd been constipated for a long time. There's no appropriate time to bring that up without being abrupt. Pretty much had to walk into the kitchen and say, "I'm constipated," and let all of the questions ensue. You're full of crap. I had to tell my mum that I had warts down there because I didn't know what the frick to do about them. I was 19 and just freaking out. Surprise number 1 was that I'd done the deed. Surprise number 2 was that I had not just those warts but also in the butt. So like 2 hours later, when I realized I'd told my mum I had warts in my butt, I was awkwardly like, Mom, it's not because he put it in there. Definitely a moment of oversharing, and I still cringe over this. Well, since so many of you in the comments apparently enjoy hearing about it when it happens, we've officially reached the story that makes the narrator gag. So well done, Warty McButtface. Ugh. Seriously though, not really your fault. I just can't stop thinking about how going number 2 through those must feel. And I've doubled over again. No. Thank you. As an 18-year-old, I had to get my mum's advice on lubricant. Doing the deed was extremely painful and I felt like there was too much traction down there. The conversation was heck of awkward, but she did give me some advice. Not me, but my older brother. Not sure how old he was, and I was just a wee kid. My brother had his first wet dream, and he woke up and noticed the splooge on his wang, and freaked out. Only my grandma was home, while my uncle also came home for a visit. My brother told them directly what happened, and my uncle decided to mess with him and told him he was going to die. My brother freaked out more and started yelling, "I'm gonna die!" I didn't really remember the details, being little at the time. All I remember was my brother seeing something in his pants and yelling that he was going to die. Nowadays, as adults, my grandma for some reason would keep bringing up that story in family get-togethers right in my brother's face. I also remember her telling this to his wife the first time. On average, I'd hear this story once or twice a year. Every time my sister introduces a new boyfriend home to us, she tells it. Every relative who comes to us, she tells it. Never knew or understand why my grandma would keep telling the story. It wasn't until I was a bit older that I understood the story and I cracked up every time she told it. My friend had to call his mum from the principal's office and tell her he wrote John Hart's The Eggplant on his own binder. He was trying to get someone else in trouble and then remembered he had a conscience. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I had to tell mine that my brother and I could no longer sleep in our bunk beds after he met his hot girlfriend. He had the top bunk and would sneak her home at night after he thought I was asleep. Their motion made the bunk beds rock, and I couldn't stay asleep with the moaning and motion. When I was 16 and I got fired from my job at the supermarket because I stole 2 quarts of ice cream. Or when I was 5 and I stole the entire block of cheese out of the fridge intending to eat the whole thing. I felt sick after about a third and then I hid it behind the bed until it got so smelly I had to tell them to move the bed because it wasn't a mouse in the wall, just cheese. Both were highly embarrassing and upsetting at the time, and I'm realizing after writing this that I apparently have food theft issues. I had to come out to my 90-year-old grandmother, who I was living with, and told her that I was gay in front of her mahjong friends in order to explain my date, during which I lost my shoes and wallet in the woods, and that's why I needed $7 to buy a pair of Goodwill sneakers so I could go to work? I was 24! I was about 6 weeks from my due date when I started bleeding. What the frick? Long story short, everything was fine. I was a smidge dilated, but okay, as was my kiddo. So the OB asks me if, outside of OB appointments, I've inserted anything into my downstairs area or done the deed. I admitted I'd done the deed nearly a week prior, but I wasn't told not to as my pregnancy was progressing just fine. The OB says, okay, that's probably what it was, and advises me to err on the side of caution and refrain a bit. Okay, fine. She leaves to get my discharge papers. My mum is staring daggers into my skull, and I'm seriously like, is there something on my face, mum? And she started screaming about how my then-husband is a jerk, and how dare he make me do the deed, etc., etc., and I was like, Mum, he didn't make me do anything. And she's like, why would you want to? She's simultaneously annoyed, disgusted, mystified, and embarrassed by her pregnant adult daughter having pregnant adult fun 32 weeks gone. Fast forward 4.5 years, my brother's girlfriend is 4 days past her due date, and wouldn't you know it, the first piece of advice to pop out of my mum's mouth was, go do the deed, that'll get her out of there. And I'm like, whoa there, it's okay for her to do it, but I'm an embarrassment? And her response, yes, but this is necessary. You wanted it. Every now and again, she's got her backwards thinking moments. I was back on spring vacation from college. At the time, my girlfriend and I had just split up. I had a one-night stand with a girl I met online. Here's where it gets bad. We were a little drunk and my parents weren't home when I got back. We made our way to the guest room, shedding clothes the whole way. We did the deed and passed out. Apparently, my mum collected the trail of clothes and left them outside the door. She also walked past my parents on the way out in the morning. I hadn't woken up yet. Here's where it gets worse. I stupidly had gone bareback. A week or so later, I started to get some concerning symptoms. I had to basically tell my dad that I barebacked some random chick, and now I had to go to the doctor because I probably have mega super transmissible diseases. I had a UTI. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to try and repurge that memory from my brain. My mother found a wrapper for a Jimmy in my room. I was trying it on to make sure that I knew what I was doing. I didn't enjoy explaining that to my mother. You know, coming out as trans was pretty bad. It was super cringeworthy, and for the next week, my mom kept making awkward comments about girly stuff, as if to say, wink wink, nudge nudge, you're a girl now. Honestly, my parents both did the exact same thing when I came out to them. But nothing was funnier than when my dad and I were watching the news together, and he was going on about how hot the weatherwoman was, when he just stopped and said, Oh yeah, I'm so sorry, I forgot, you're a girl. I told him, yeah, and I've had girlfriends for over a year now. He just stayed silent for a few seconds before mumbling, so you're a lesbian? Telling mine that I had depression and thoughts of self-deletion. I was almost not able to tell them because I didn't want them to worry about me. That I kinda sorta set a gas station on fire. It was really only a couple of gas pumps out by some abandoned garages, and it honestly was an accident, but it was quite embarrassing. Actually, the most embarrassing part was that the guy on the motorcycle who'd seen the fire from the road and came over to put it out escorted me home and made me tell my parents. That was embarrassing, especially since my father was the biker's guidance counselor. Awkward. Well, at least your father had a pretty good indication that he was doing his job right and setting this man on the right tracks to solve problems when he saw them. Good on your dad and the random biker for being such diligent and community-minded souls. I had to explain to mine that the reason I was coming home for the weekend was because my husband had shoved me during an argument. We were together for 10 years before getting married. Mum and Dad both put a lot of money into the wedding. Not a ton of money by normal standards, but a lot of money by our family's standards. I moved home a month later, and I'm currently getting divorced. But I'll never forget the dread I felt telling my mum why I was leaving him. I thought I was smarter than that. Yes, we're doing the deed. No, we're not a couple. Telling mine the first time I got a bladder infection, because everyone knows darn well that likely means inexperienced deed doing. Went out rollerblading the one time. I had to come home and tell my parents I was gay. When I asked mine, "What's your first name?" Coming out to my parents as a drag queen. It didn't go too badly. My dad accepted it better than when I told him I was bi, but the subsequent question and answer session was awkward as heck. I was messing around with inserting things while flicking the bean. When I was about 12, all of a sudden I feel a ripping sensation and blood comes pouring out. I freaked out and had to tell my mum that I was doing it with a magic marker. She just laughed at me. She likes to bring that one up at random family dinners 10 years later. Fun times. The neck massager she found in my room was actually a massager for a different thing. Just kidding, I never told her. Screw that. When I told mine I was dating an Indian girl. This hasn't happened yet, but I'd surely be screwed if my mum sees the things that I linked on Reddit. This happened to me when I was in 8th standard. I was painfully awkward near girls, hence I never had the guts to talk to my crush about my feelings. My crush was extremely smart, rated over smart by my mum, active and vivacious. Of course, she was cute. My mum was aware of my infatuation with her because she had once discovered a Valentine's Day card in my bag, which I'd planned to give her but couldn't. My mum wasn't very happy with that since, according to her, I should focus myself on making myself a better person rather than engaging in meaningless pursuits, and she actually blamed my crush for that. Probably she was just jealous because my crush was much more accomplished than I was. So one day, my crush calls me and I pick up the landline. My heart was already in my mouth. I tried to act cool and was talking to her. Somehow, my mum, call it her sixth sense or my apparent excitement over the phone, comes to know who I'm talking to. My crush says, "So, have you done the assignment yet? Actually, I've lost my notebook and I was wondering if you had seen it." "No, I haven't completed the assignment. Sorry to hear that. Where did you—" Then suddenly, "Why are you talking to that girl? I told you to stay away from her. Put the phone down now," came my mum's shrill voice behind me. I was so freaked out and embarrassed that I put the phone down that instant. I didn't have the guts to call her back. I had a big fight with my mum and sulked all day. The next day, I got to go to my crush and apologize to her about the matter. She handled it very well. The day after that, my mum invited her over to our house to make up for it. She felt guilty about it too. But things were never the same between me and my crush again, and we barely talked. Needless to say, she never called me again. I was 5 or 6 years old, playing in my room, trying to squeeze into small spaces to make my secret hiding place. I did not know how boy and girl bits worked. As I was crawling under the bed, halfway under, my little Johnson snuck into itself. I ran out of there as fast as I could, and I started frantically telling both my parents, who were watching the news in the living room, that my wee-wee had disappeared. They started laughing, and even to this day, 22 years later, the story does not cease to be told at family parties. I crashed my Cherokee into a concrete barrier. Okay, well, maybe not crashed, but more like firmly bumped. I was driving home late one night in winter. It had done that weird thing where it rained just enough to put a sheen on the road, and they hadn't even thrown out the salt just yet. So long story short, I took an S-bend a little too tight, spun out, and hit the concrete barrier head-on. Hard enough to send everything in the back seat onto my lap and lurch the passenger seat into the glove box. Also hard enough to cause enough cosmetic damage to pinch the hood shut and dent the passenger side quarter panel. Hardly noticeable if you didn't look too hard. The old dog stalled because I let the clutch out, but started back up and got me back home. I wasn't going to tell my parents until the whiplash set in 2 days later and I couldn't turn my head. I went to them crying that my head was stuck because I crashed my old Jeep. I was expecting a talking to and I got laughed at instead. "Seriously? The car looks fine. Are you okay though?" We pulled out the dings with a hand winch, a sledgehammer, and a crowbar. Everything in the engine bay was perfectly fine, thanks to a huge bull bar that I had in the front. I went to the chiropractor and life continued. Sadly, I had to sell that old dinosaur a couple of months ago for something newer. Probably not the safest car in terms of no airbags and it was built in '89, but still the best car I'd ever had. I was 18 and it was Christmas night. I started getting really sick. Some kind of stomach virus and I thought I was dying. Ended up crapping in the bed. It was very awkward when I woke up at 6 a.m. in wet boxers and waddled into my parents' room to tell them. I've had to tell mine that I've been going through the divorce from hell for the last 2 years. I thought it was embarrassing when I had to tell my dad about it 2 years ago, but I've more or less run through my savings, so tomorrow I need to call him and ask if I can borrow money to pay my attorney fees and alimony. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.